should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Laza. In a few moments, we'll be going live to Bristol as pro-Palestinian protesters are planning a national day of action across the UK. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tamsin.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 3 o'clock. Pro-Palestinian marches are taking place in London and Bristol, with some supporters describing Israel as a terror state.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terror state!
Well, these pictures are coming to us from Camden in North London, where demonstrators are waving Palestinian flags amid a large police presence. There are also reports of around 200 protesters at London Bridge Station. British Transport Police are there and a cordon is in place at the entrance. Protesters are also marching in Bristol. GB News reporter Jeff Moody is there.
Calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
Jeff Moody in Bristol there. Well, one arrest has been made as Just Stop Oil protesters hold a People versus Oil demonstration in the capital. Activists met at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. They're marching against the government's decision to licence more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government is imprisoning peaceful protesters while protecting those who it describes as climate criminals. GB News reporter Will Hollis is there.
Well, the City of London is at a standstill now as Just Stop Oil protesters take to the roads. You can hear chants of Just Stop Oil, save our children, signs that say, "Grandad, what did you do to save my world?" There are people of all ages here at this demonstration. It's called People versus Oil. Young and old, children and grandparents, all here united by one cause, stopping oil. But we know that this year the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has licensed 100 new gas and oil fields. There are lots of police here as well. They're here because they are protecting the public, but they also have new powers that came in earlier this year to arrest people that are disproportionately trying to affect road networks, which is what Just Stop Oil traditionally do.
The Israeli military is warning thousands of people to leave the south of Gaza as it tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Earlier warnings saw scores of people move from the north of Gaza amid the escalating conflict. Leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time westward. Meanwhile, Israel says it'll allow 2 truckloads of fuel into Gaza each day, following international pressure. The White House says fuel delivery should continue on a regular basis and in larger quantities. Major advertisers are pulling their business from X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. Disney, Warner Brothers and US network NBC are among those who've paused their advertising. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy has turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year.
OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
The creator of Wallace and Gromit and the Chicken Run films has enough clay for just one more film after its supplier ceased operations. When New Clay Products announced the closure of its facility near Torquay earlier this year, Aardman Animations quickly bought all its remaining stock. According to The Telegraph, the studio has just enough to complete its new Wallace and Gromit feature, due for release next year. New Clay produced a particular kind of plasticine, which they say is perfect for animating. Stop-motion artists say using the wrong kind would be like wearing the wrong trousers. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Thank you, Tamsin. Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, coming up, more than 100 pro-Palestinian rallies are set to take place across the UK as organisers say that they will continue these marches until a ceasefire is called. I'll be live with our reporter in Bristol in just a moment. Meanwhile, Just Stop Oil protesters are taking to the streets of London later today. Now, the protesters say that the government is waging war on the people for licensing more than 100 new oil and gas projects. Do you agree? Then stay tuned at 3:20. It's time for climate control as climate heating gases reach record highs, according to a UN report. Should the government be doing more to reduce the burning of fossil fuels? I'll be joined in the studio by Jim Dale and Lois Perry to debate this. And Lord Moylan is the political spotlight this week. Daniel Moylan sits in the House of Lords after an illustrious career where he has served as a diplomat and a former banker. He was also an advisor to Boris Johnson, and he backed Suella Braverman for the Conservative leadership role. He'll be joining me in about 45 minutes' time. That's on the way. Stay tuned at 5 o'clock, my difficult conversation.
A new generation of drugs, or can be Simkevi and Kaftrio, is absolutely transforming the lives of patients with cystic fibrosis. So people who would have been waiting for double lung transplants now living happy, healthy lives. But NICE is now saying we can't afford them. So will the Prime Minister and his new Health Secretary get round the table with NICE and with the drugs company to make sure that children being born with cystic fibrosis today get those life-saving drugs in the same way that children currently living with CF are getting them?
Prime Minister, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising an important issue. I'll of course ask the Health Secretary to look into it. I shall understand that NICE operates independently from government, but if there's a conversation that can be had, I'll ensure that it takes place.
Well, that was Labour's Minister for Climate Change speaking to the Prime Minister for the government intervention into making cystic fibrosis miracle drugs available to people who need them most. Then stay tuned at 5. I'll be speaking to Joseph, who's living with the condition and has been campaigning to make these drugs available. You won't want to miss that. That is on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. But let's start with things that have been going on consistently for weekends after weekend after weekend. Pro-Palestinian protesters, they're now holding more demonstrations across the UK. Organisers are calling for a national day of action, demanding a ceasefire in the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Now, up to 100 rallies are planned at various locations across the country And protesters say that they will keep on carrying on similar rallies until a ceasefire is achieved. Well, our reporter Jeff Moody has been covering the protest in Bristol, and here's what he sent us.
Well, they're calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
Well, that was Jeff Moody, our reporter. But protests seem to be the thing at the moment, because Just Stop Oil protesters are holding a people versus oil protest today as well. It's in protest against the government licensing more than 100 new oil and gas projects. Now, the group say that the government is imprisoning peaceful protesters and protecting the real criminals who are boiling our planet. Well, joining me now from the protests around on the ground is GBNews reporter Will Hollis. Will, so talk to me about these protesters. What are they saying? They're talking about boiling the planet. What have they been saying to you?
Yes, well, this is Just Stop Oil, and they're outside of Shell's headquarters. You can see that there is a ring of steel and officers, at least 20 of them, in front of that ring of steel. We're coming towards the end of this day of action, people versus oil, and you can see that there's still around 100 people still hanging about. Occasionally there'll be a speech and a couple of chants. The reason that people are here are, let's give 3 examples. One is because they say that oil companies are waging a war on young people, that there's a system that is condemning them to death because of fossil fuels. Another one of the reasons is because Minister Rishi Sunak is in the pockets of big oil companies. Now, a lot of the people down here come from all sorts of walks of life, but a lot of them are young, and a lot of them are grandparents as well. They've started out here outside of Shell's headquarters, but they've gone around the city of London, doing a bit of a snake in a circle, crossing a couple of the bridges at the Thames. And as they've been doing so, some of those protesters have been arrested. It is what you can start to expect immediately from these protests, particularly because police recently had new powers to arrest people under the Public Order Act, under Section 7, people that are disproportionately targeting key infrastructure like roads. And I had a chance to speak to one gentleman as he was being arrested, a guy called John Lardner.
Well, I've been arrested, according to the police officers, for being too slow in moving off the road because the road is an A or a B road, which under Section 30 or whatever it is, 7, is now a punishable offence. As far as I'm concerned, temporarily blocking the highway in order to emphasise the fact that new oil and gas and coal licences spell a death knell for the children and grandchildren of these police officers, and for you, and for everybody. And I'm being arrested for pointing this out because the government have passed laws to make protest very, very difficult, to make what before would have been legal is now illegal. So we have to ask ourselves, when laws no longer reflect justice in a properly functioning democracy, we have to ask ourselves, where are we going?
Well, there was a number of protesters arrested here today. We don't know what's happened to them since, but they were taken away in the back of a police van. I did actually ask John, what does he think of all the people that get really frustrated and maybe would even support their kind of cause? And he said that it's something that has to be done because that's how strongly he feels about it. And he's not the only one here in London protesting that Just Stop Oil should happen.
Listen, Will, thank you very much. Always good to speak to you. Thank you for that. That's Will Hollis there in London at the Just Stop Oil protest. But let's go over to Israel now, because over in Gaza, Israeli forces have continued their bombardments of the city with over 20 Palestinians killed overnight. Now, this comes as Hamas claimed responsibility for a shooting near Jerusalem that killed an Israeli soldier. I'm joined now by Mr. Via Uri Geller, who is live in Tel Aviv. Uri, thank you so much for joining us repeatedly each week and telling us what's been going on. Can you update us from your perspective?
Okay, I heard, thank you, by the way, for having me on your show again, Nana. I just heard all the conversation about the demonstrations. Look, I want all your viewers in the United Kingdom and Europe to listen to what I have to say about this. This is very important. Listen, whatever happened in Israel is a warning, because the same people who did it here in Israel, the massacre, are already in your country, and they will do exactly the same, Now, this is a part of a master plan of the Islamic extremists, what we call jihadists. They are terrorists. Now, this is such a master plan to take over the Western society. And I'll tell you how. It's crazy. They're all over Europe. They're all over England. The same people, not all of them, but most of the people who are demonstrating there are jihadists. And in the coming 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the massacre that happened in Israel will happen all over Europe, and it will happen all over England. So that's what I have to say about the demonstrations. Now, concerning Gaza, what's happening there is why Hamas, ISIS, why don't they release the hostages? The women, the children, the babies, the elderly, the disabled, the Holocaust victims. If they release all of them, no doubt in my mind, there will be a ceasefire.
Yeah, you know, Uri, what you said at the beginning, though, some people might say that is a big conspiracy theory, although I hear you, because, you know, if we don't police our borders correctly, then there is no doubt that people from Hamas could easily seep through, especially the way, as you've seen, across Europe, the borders are so porous, and with the Schengen, there's no real checking of who's where. So it's quite easy for them to do this, and we have heard reports that has often been a master plan for many of these groups. But some might say that it's a conspiracy theory. But I want to talk to you with regard to the hostages, because Israel have admitted, Benjamin Netanyahu has admitted that there have been way more civilian casualties than he was anticipating. And, of course, that may reflect on why Hamas haven't released the hostages. Could that be one of the bartering things they're going to try and use?
Look, I'm not a politician, and I don't really know what's going in the inner circle of political the political groups and the army and the navy and the air force. But what I do know is that it is a war, and if Hamas, ISIS did not do this, this would have not happened. We are waiting for the release of all the hostages. Release all the hostages. Ceasefire will come. Release all the hostages. We must bring these kids home. We must bring the babies home.
Yeah.
Nana, they kidnapped babies, 9-month-old babies.
But they would argue, but they would argue, and you hear them arguing, that this war started well before the 7th, and that babies and women and children are being killed in Gaza as a result.
Look, Nana, I'm sorry to hear about women and children being killed in Gaza. We have nothing against the Palestinians. And as I told you before, I am attached to a charity here in Israel that is called Save a Child's Heart. So far, we have saved the lives of 8,000 children with open heart surgery from 68 countries. Half of them are Palestinians. Believe it or not, while this war is going on, sick children from Gaza are coming to be healed in Israel, in hospitals in Israel. So we have no war. We have nothing against the Gazan people, the Palestinian people. We have a major, massive problem with Hamas-ISIS. Let the children go out. Release the kids. Release them today. Release them.
I wish they would. I don't know why they don't. Uri, it's always good to talk to you. Stay safe, and we'll hopefully speak to you again next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
That is Uri Geller. He is a mystifier. He's world known, and he's there living in Israel, giving us an update on the situation between Israel and Hamas. Well, if you just joined me, welcome on board. It's fast approaching 20 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are at the People's Channel. Coming up, Just Stop Oil protesters have taken to the streets of London, and they claim that the government is waging war on the people for licensing more than 100 new oil and gas projects. Do you agree with them? I'll be speaking to GB News reporter live on the ground. We just had a chat with him. Next up, though, Lois Perry and Jim Dale, climate control.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
23 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. You haven't missed too much, just 20 minutes, but we've got a lot to get through. I've got so much coming up. It's now time for climate control. Meteorologist and social commentator Jim Dale is in the studio with me, as well as political commentator of Car 26. Lois Perry. OK, let's start with the Just Stop Oil protests. I'm going to have to start with Jim because what do you make of it? Because they're talking about...
Yeah, the Just Stop Oil protests that are in London today, as previously, they're sending out a message, and it's an extremely important message, and they're allowed to do that.
The message is that we're wearing luminous day-glow tops made out of fossil fuels, probably.
Well, that's...
And we probably got here by cars.
Yeah, I don't think... Not necessarily, you don't know that, but they're sending out a very important message, and it goes with the fact that 2023, 99.9% will be the hottest year globally on record for 120,000 years, give or take, and that is why they're there, because they're showing a concern, not necessarily for themselves, but for their children, grandchildren, etc. That's what it's about. It's not a selfish march.
Just briefly, because I know Lewis was just about to come in. 120,000 years worth of records. Did we have records from 120,000 years, or is this...
Yeah, no, we have records for 120,000 years because we look at ice cores, we look at soil samples, scientists, geologists, better people than me, you and Lois, they do this, they extract, they look, they see, and you know how this works. If they can dig up dinosaurs and decide when they...
You don't know what I know. Lois.
The truth is the ice cores actually show the opposite to what Jim's saying. They show that there's been periods in history where it's been a lot warmer, especially in this country. We have also had periods of time where we were connected to Europe and we've broken away. So throughout history, the Earth has warmed and cooled down. We've had this discussion so many times, Jim. The fact that you've just used ice cores to try and back up your version of events is quite interesting, actually, because they all say the opposite. But isn't the truth that the Just Stop Oil protesters should really be actually protesting against the Hamas supporting protesters today? Because with all those rockets that have been let off and all that concrete used in the tunnels, they're surely using a lot more CO2 than any of us.
That's a completely and utterly separate entity.
Well,
you know it. You know it.
Hold on.
We don't need to go into Palestine and
hold on.
all the rest of it.
You can't separate all of this because the whole thing is the fact that the world is interconnected. So what you do in one place affects another, and so on and so forth. That's the point she's making. It's a respectable point, and it is a good point. But from your view, then,
go on.
Just Stop Oil. Surely they should be protesting in, say, China or somewhere like that. Wouldn't that be...
Well, they're in Britain and they're entitled to protest, and what they're protesting against is the licences from this government that have been awarded to oil companies to continue the dread line that has become apparent over the last 30 or 40 years concerning fossil fuels. That's exactly what's going on. It's exactly why we're seeing the instances around the globe, not just in the UK, particularly around the globe, that are now happening simply because of the CO2 that's gone into the atmosphere that is at record levels. That is why, and if we go back to school, if we want to go back to school at CSE level, we can do that and say this is the greenhouse effect. That's exactly what's going on, and it's been exacerbated.
That's according to you as a meteorologist and others who say that, but there are those who think differently.
Absolutely. I mean, since the CO2 levels have been recorded in the 1960s, they have increased, but under half of that increase is due to human activity, and over half is natural rising in CO2 levels. And we only account for 12% of CO2 levels full stop in terms of the increase, or full stop anyway. So, the whole CO2 thing is so open for debate. There's so many people that disagree with you, Jim. For you to just state it as scientific fact, science is about debate, and there are lots and lots of scientists that we've said this 100 times to each other, that disagree with you. But the point is, this is, as Nana correctly said, this is a global issue. There's nothing that we can do in this country. You've got China building the same amount of coal-fired power stations each year that we've got in total in this country.
So listen, Lois, we know
so we should frack, baby.
You're obviously being pushed by the fracking industry to say exactly that on TV.
Well, you're obviously being pushed by the renewables. The truth is, neither of us are being funded by either of those groups, are we? You're not being funded by renewables, and I'm not being funded by the fossil fuel industry.
No, but
we both passionately believe.
Let's just go back to the CO2 bit. You're claiming that half the CO2 was natural. Where is the natural bit in that? Tell me where that is actually coming from.
So, hang on a minute. This is.
Well, go on, answer the question.
OK, well, I've been sent it this this morning by a physicist, actually, by a doctor in physics. But I can send you the information.
Well, just tell me. Just tell me.
Just tell us, because we're here listening.
So the thing is, the majority of the CO2 in the atmosphere is natural. That's a fact.
Tell me where that natural element is coming from.
Okay,
because
all right,
it's
I'll give you an example. No, it's not false at all. Okay, hang on a minute. What do you mean it's false? You're the one that says that farming and methane and CO2 production from farming and animals...
Farming is not a natural event. It is a man-made event.
Hold on. Farming has to be done. It is things that are given from cows and animals that live
that's natural.
That is part of mankind's evolution.
Can I make one point?
Let her finish, then you can come back.
In terms of our natural emissions, so not emissions from burning fuels or whatever, but our natural emissions as humans... Termites produce more CO2 than us as humans. Did you know that?
Did you know that, Jim?
I think it's false, to be honest with you, by a long stretch. No, I didn't know because it's absolutely false.
Everything I
just say, this programme is called Climate Control. It's not Climate We Are Safe. Thank you very much.
Listen, I'll decide.
It's not called. It's not called.
Hold on a second.
This is weather.
Sorry. I'll decide what is within the topics. Within climate control, I choose the topics now. Answer the question that Lois posed to you.
What was the question now? I forgot it. Something about termites.
I
We're
said,
into termites,
are you aware that in terms
termites...
of our natural emissions, I'm not talking about emissions, for example, from you and I, from maybe putting a fire on or whatever, but our natural emissions are less as human beings than termites?
No, they're not. And it's we humans...
Okay.
And our practices,
Nana, would you like
and our various practices that have contributed to the highest CO2 levels that we've seen since mankind has been on Earth.
Okay, but
so we can see that.
It is untrue.
Stop, Lois.
Sorry.
Okay, so first of all, since mankind came on Earth, we don't have records that far back. So you're just saying that there is no evidence to what you're.
Yes, there is. There is.
Where is the evidence?
I've already said to you, geologists look back at ice cores. They look back at soil samples. You can go back. You can go beyond.
Was on Earth.
300,000 years is about where it is, but we weren't polluting the Earth at that stage.
So if mankind was on Earth 300,000 years ago, you don't have records from then. You said 120,000 years. That's why I'm saying you cannot say that, because you don't have any evidence.
You can go back, and it's quite true in history.
No. Listen, I listened to what you say, and you said you had records from 120,000 years.
I don't have the records.
Well, so who has the records now?
The geologists that look at this. I'm a meteorologist, not a geologist. They do this. This is how it works. This is science.
As a wider term, the phrase "you," which is the one that you used, have records from 120,000 years.
Yeah, 97%.
Mankind was on Earth 300,000 years ago. You don't have records of 180,000 years by your own words, Jim. All right, listen, if you just tuned in, this is GBNews on TV, online and digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. On the way, political spotlight. And for this week, Lord Daniel Moylan will be joining me in the studio to look through his career as a politician, as well as the current state of British politics. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. 3:31, this is the latest from the GB newsroom. Pro-Palestine supporters are marching in London, with some heard reciting the controversial From the River to the Sea chant.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terrorist state!
These pictures are from Camden in North London, where you can see demonstrators waving Palestinian flags. There's also a large police presence at the rally. GB News reporter Jeff Moody is at a march in Bristol.
Calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
At least 4 arrests have been made as Just Stop Oil protesters hold a People versus Oil demonstration in the capital. Activists met at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. They're marching against the government's decision to licence more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government is imprisoning peaceful protesters while protecting those who it describes as climate criminals. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement after a fall in inflation. It's understood Jeremy Hunt is considering cutting rates on inheritance and business tax in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Nana.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this?
Are you rethinking this policy?
Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your views, so I'm going to read some of them out because we had a bit of a chat with Jim Dale and Lois Perry, which is always fun. Les says the Just Stop Oil fools should be protesting about Just Stop Sewage and Just Stop Dogs Mess. Good one. Tony says, why are Just Stop Oil vegans wearing oil-based clothes and wearing leather shoes? Should they not be wearing wooden clogs? I don't know, isn't that trees now? I mean, you're not going to have much left, are you? Maureen says, I want to know, what do they want if they stop oil? What do they get? What are they doing? How do they live without oil? Why don't you ask them how are we to live without oil? Yeah, we've asked them many times, and unfortunately, Maureen, they don't really have much of an answer. They just go, well, it's not for us to decide. We're not here to work out politics. We're only here to save the planet and blah, blah, blah. And it goes on like that. It's literally like hitting your head against a brick wall. Or as Dave has said here, he said, my head is now bleeding from banging it on the desk listening to Jim Dale. Checking. And Lois. No, Lois. He doesn't add Lois in there. But Lucy says climate change is a real thing. I completely support them protesting, just not stopping ambulances, etc. Well, listen, Lucy, I think most people would agree with you that climate change is a real thing because the climate is always changing. Everything is always changing. Nothing stays the same, does it ever? So to make that statement is fair enough, but whether we are responsible for large proportions of that change is the question. And to attribute the blame of the changing climate entirely on mankind seems a bit questionable to me, but we'll carry on asking those questions. Well, now, though, it's time for this week's Political Spotlight, and joining me to shine a light is a man who sits in the upper house of Parliament. He's a former diplomat and merchant banker. He also once served as the chief airport advisor to Boris Johnson as Mayor of London and worked as deputy chairman of Transport for London, as well as the co-chairman of Urban Design London. In 2010, he was described as one of London's most powerful and colourful politicians by the Evening Standard. Well, joining me now to shine a light this week is Daniel Moylan, or more appropriately, Lord Moylan. Good afternoon, Lord Moylan.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Good afternoon. What a fall I've suffered since 2010 when I was powerful. I'm not powerful at all now anyway. I just sit in the House of Lords and chunder away.
Well, to be fair, though, it is quite a powerful chamber. They can stop government policies from going through, like things like Rwanda, if they don't decide or deem it
it's certainly the case that the House of Lords has quite a power of obstruction if they choose to use it. And towards the end of a parliament, they get more powerful and more inclined to use it. So it is going to be difficult for the government, I think, to get new legislation through the House of Lords. It can ultimately, the Commons can override the Lords, but that does take time. And does the government have enough time? We have to see what the plan is.
No, they don't. I don't know what they're going to do, frankly. I mean, it's just frightening. So you're a Lord. You've had a very busy career in politics. Seeing yourself as Lord now, did you imagine that you would be a Lord sitting in the House of Lords? No,
I never had that as a sort of ambition. I stood for Parliament when I was quite young, all the way back in 1983, and came quite close to getting elected. I lost by 230-something votes, but that's enough to lose. You can lose by one. But then, because I had to work and I had to have a job and so on, I never became a sort of full-time politician, and instead my political interests were diverted into more like local government, being a local councillor, which I was for nearly 30 years. But that was in London, and that also got me involved then in London politics and involved with the mayoralty. And then when Boris became mayor, he needed someone who had some transport experience to come on the board of TfL. And politically, I did that. I'd done a lot of transport-type stuff, environment, planning, things of that sort. That was my sort of area. So he asked me to be deputy chairman of TfL, which was, he chaired it, but I was the deputy chairman sort of day to day. And I was doing that while I was still on the council. And that carried on. That came to an end, of course, in 2016 when Sir Boris left office. Sadiq was elected. He obviously Sadiq is going to have his own people coming in doing jobs like that. So we parted politely, nice exchange of letters and so on. It wasn't a bitter parting or anything. It was just a natural thing. So I was really surprised then when Boris said, when he became Prime Minister, that he'd like to nominate me for a peerage. And I was grateful for that because actually it gave me another opportunity to carry on sort of contributing to public debate, really, because that's what the Lords does. It's more, it does make decisions and it can hold things up, but fundamentally the government decides stuff. The Lords is a place for debate, and it's a very interesting place for debate because of the diversity of opinion there.
What are your thoughts then with regard to people calling for the Lords to be an elected chamber?
Yeah, well, I think there's always going to be a case for reform of the House of Lords. But I'd always suggest to people who are thinking of that the way to start is to ask yourself, what is it the House of Lords actually does? First question. Is that worth doing and necessary? Is it a valuable thing to do? And how will it be done better under any new system? Now, my answer to that would be what the House of Lords does most of the time is it scrutinises legislation in detail. And we do it without any limitation of time or limitation on speakers. I know it's really boring for the government, they have to listen to us. But all this guillotining stuff and timetabling stuff you get in the Commons, where they've got so many hours and no more to debate particular bills and so on. We don't have any of that. So the government really has to answer detailed questions about legislation. And I think it is worth doing. And my worry is, if you had people who were elected doing it, is that their main focus, like the Commons, would be on getting re-elected and being seen out there in their photographs and so on. They wouldn't be interested in doing that detailed work on legislation. And so that would end up being lost completely. That's the worry. But there is always a case for reform. And, of course, you can't say that electing people is bad. And there may be a way around it, but it's going to be difficult to... be a lot more expensive, of course.
I don't think I could put up with any more of these elections. I mean, the Conservative Party have just literally tied themselves in knots, getting rid of leaders and putting leaders in. And one of the people that you backed, though, for leadership was Suella Braverman.
I did, yes, when she was a contender.
Do you think... I mean, the Tory Party, I just don't know what to say about them. I'm so disappointed watching the way they've behaved. But do you think that actually Suella Braverman would make a better leader than Rishi Sunak?
Well, I think we've got to look at the circumstances we're in at the moment, and the party is in pretty poor shape. I think the real worry is not who is the leader of the Conservative Party at the moment. The real worry is, as I saw a pollster say the other day, the public have stopped listening to the Conservative Party. And that is because we haven't delivered what we promised to. I mean, I'm quite close to Boris. I would have wanted Boris. I wanted Boris to stay on as leader. I think the MPs who got rid of him were jumping off a cliff. And they didn't know what was the other side, what was at the bottom of the cliff. They just jumped. And of course, what they've jumped into has turned out to be...
An abyss.
They haven't reached bottom yet, possibly. They're probably still...
Their feet are stuck in the mud at the
probably
bottom.
still coming down off that cliff edge, and they haven't realised that they haven't reached bottom.
I think they have reached the bottom. I just think they're sinking.
So I think you've got to have an appeal that people actually listen to. And the trouble is that we haven't delivered on key things we promised. The small boats it may not be the most important thing that people worry about. They may be more concerned, understandably, about the cost of living and things like that. I understand that. But they look at it and they say, well, if you can't do that, what can you do? And we've completely failed to deliver on it, and it looks like now we won't deliver on it at all before the election.
But with such a huge majority, how could they fail? How?
I know. I think the truth is COVID did put a 2-year, sort of disruptor into the whole thing, and the government... whether they made the right decisions about lockdowns is another story, but they had to handle it. That became the dominant thing. And I think they could have got more done during that time, but the whole of Whitehall was distracted and focused only on COVID, and other stuff never happened, when I think they should have been using that time to make things happen. But they didn't have the bandwidth, and they didn't do it. So they're trying to pick up after that. And I heard Boris say once, and it's very wise of him, he said, the history of pandemics is the history of solidarity followed by anger. While it's all happening, you stick together. When it's all over, you get really angry about it all. And that was what, in some senses, he was a victim of. So by the time we were coming out of COVID, he was suffering from the fact that he was identified with a period that people were looking back on it now, and instead of saying, let's clap for the NHS or whatever, they're saying, why? But what happened to the kids? And what happened to the schools? And what happened to the old people? And they started to get angry about it. And so he never really, in a sense, recovered from that. And so we ended up with MPs saying, well, he's got to go. And then, then you get, they choose Liz Truss and not Rishi. And then they end up with Rishi and so on. So nobody really has a clue what's going on since then.
I just find it frightening watching the way things are going and the way they have behaved, talking about potentially having a new leader, Suella Braverman's letter. Do you think she was right to write such a letter in that manner? A lot of people look at that and see, some people was calling it almost like a letter from a spurned lover. That's how they were seeing it. Do you think? Well, I think she was there at the Home Secretary at the time.
I don't think anyone's behaved with perfect. I mean, look, they're Conservatives. What are Conservatives meant to do in dark days like this? They're meant to stick together and stick by the leadership of the party. And that's what they've all failed to do for the last, since they got rid of Boris. They've failed to do that, and that's why they're falling apart. So there comes a time when, you need these arguments about what is the right way of dealing with the votes. She has one view, Rishi appears to have a different view. It's all, they're all changing their views. So she's entitled to her view, but it is true that she should have been able to get that through as Home Secretary when she was in government, and if she'd failed to do so, maybe she should have resigned at that point. But this argument was going to happen anyway, because they obviously don't agree about what the right method is and whether we need to, how radical we need to be in relation to the European Convention on Human Rights and other things like that in order to achieve what we want to achieve.
So what about Rwanda then? Because that's a lot of people looking at that saying how ridiculous it is and how ridiculous a prospect and an idea, and it was never going to happen. I personally think it's a good idea. I think an external processing area somewhere else is a good plan. A lot of countries do it. The UN have used Rwanda before. What is your view on it?
Look, what we're dealing with here is a number of large criminal businesses. Stop looking at Rwanda for a moment and look at what's actually happening in Europe. These are large criminal businesses. They are run for a profit, and they have a business model, and that business model involves taking people from places like Syria and Afghanistan, charging them a lot of money, and then shipping them one way or another across Europe to where they want to go. And a lot of them want to come here, and they end up on the beaches at Calais, where they're provided nicely with unsafe dinghies, all part of the package, and you're popped in the dinghy and you said, carry on, because by the time it sinks, there'll be a boat to pick you up and take you to England. And that's the whole thing. And we make the profit, and if you're not paying us in cash, we've probably got some other way of having you in bonded labour or some sort of modern slavery when you get there to extract the value from you if you haven't actually paid us in cash. That's the sort of businesses they are. Now, you've got to find a way. What the government's been trying to do is to find a way of making that business model unworkable so that people will not pay them, so that it's not profitable anymore. And one of the ways of doing that would be to say that the moment you land in England, you're in Rwanda, which is not where you wanted to go at all. And you don't have to send everyone to Rwanda to do this. You just have to send enough people for the punters, so to speak, out there to say, we're not going to pay that money anymore because there's no guarantee we're going to end up where we want to go. We could end up in Rwanda. So that was the idea behind the whole thing. Now, whether you can make that work, there were other methods proposed and discussed, but that's the one that was chosen. That's the route that was chosen, to get them all to Rwanda and thus to disrupt the business model and make these businesses unviable commercially. Because it doesn't seem to be the case that you can break them up through the criminal law. You'd need all the police forces in Europe collaborating, I suppose, and breaking down all the different chains, all the bits of the chain in order to do it. So to tackle it at that end seemed the right thing to do. But it doesn't have to have everybody in Rwanda.
Because even if you think about it, even if it's only 200 people, the first 200 people won't want to be guinea pigs. Others will say, well, let the others go first. And then if that's in place, the very next 200 people, they're not going to pay because they know that they will be the next ones.
That's the sort of idea. Yeah. And you'd have to see if it worked or how many you would have to send in order for it to work. But that's the basic idea, yeah.
Well, interesting, because I think, in your view, then, we've got about a minute left. What do you think? Is there anything that the Conservative Party could do to save themselves?
Well, the Conservative Party can save itself, that's true. That doesn't mean to say necessarily the Conservative Party can win the next election. And I'm not a gloomster about this, because lots of things can happen and things can turn around. And look at the mess the Labour Party has found itself in. I mean, it's such a very good conference in Liverpool they had, and then a few weeks later, what are they doing? Scratching each other's eyes out over the old wound of anti-Semitism again. So a lot of things can change, and let's see how it goes. But it's difficult for the Tories at the moment, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it is. But possibly the Labour Party might shoot themselves in the foot because they keep doing it. And, well, anti-Semitism appears to be still within their party as well. Lord Moylan, thank you very much for coming to talk to me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Nana.
There you go. See, I got a good chance to talk to him properly. Listen, if you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Don't forget as well, you can download the GB News app. Coming in the next hour, my monologue on policing. You won't want to miss that. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead, it's going to be another unsettled day on Sunday with some further rain to come on Monday too, but then hopefully it will start to turn a bit drier, but colder as we head towards the middle of next week. Back to here and now, we have got this huge area low pressure really dominating proceedings. That's bringing in some further rain this evening across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland. Some of that will be quite heavy in places. Drier and clearer initially for a good chunk of England and Wales, but then later on in the night we will then start to see rain return here too. Quite blustery down towards the far southwest of the country and also up across the Northern Isles, but with all the cloud and wind around, it's going to be a mild one for most of us. Temperatures at lowest probably around 4 to 5 degrees in the north. So really Sunday is going to be a fairly unsettled day, a mixture of showers or longer spells of rain. There will be some brightness around. Maybe the best of that will be across eastern Scotland as we go into the afternoon. But despite the cloud and rain, it will be another mild one. Temperatures in the south reaching around 14 or 15 degrees, so maybe a shade cooler than what we have seen today. Into Monday, you can see further rain on the charts for most of us. In between, there will be some brightness around, and as we go through into Tuesday and Wednesday, the drier theme will become increasingly widespread with an increasing amount of sunshine. But for most of us, temperatures will be trending away.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Well, hello, if you just tuned in, welcome on board. My difficult conversation, I'll be speaking to Joseph Lamperti, who was born with cystic fibrosis and has been campaigning for miracle drugs to be made available for children who are born with the condition. This is an interview that you will not want to miss. He will be there at 5.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me are author and broadcaster columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lauser. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you very much and good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. This is the latest. Pro-Palestine marches have been taking place in London and Bristol, with some supporters describing Israel as a terror state.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terror state!
These pictures are coming to us from Camden in North London, where demonstrators were waving Palestinian flags amid a large police presence. There are also reports of around 200 protesters at London Bridge Station. British Transport Police cordoned off the area. Protesters were also marching in Bristol. GB News reporter Jeff Moody is there.
Calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
At least 4 arrests were made during a Just Stop Oil protest in London today. Activists met at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. They marched against the approval of more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government's imprisoning peaceful protesters while protecting those who it describes as climate criminals. GB News reporter Will Hollis has been following the day's events.
Well, the City of London is at a standstill now as Just Stop Oil protesters take to the roads. You can hear chants of Just Stop Oil, save our children, signs that say, "Grandad, what did you do to save my world?" There are people of all ages here at this demonstration. It's called People versus Oil. Young and old, children and grandparents, all here united by one cause, stopping oil. But we know that this year the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has licensed 100 new gas and oil fields. There are lots of police here as well. They're here because they are protecting the public, but they also have new powers that came in earlier this year to arrest people that are disproportionately trying to affect road networks, which is what Just Stop Oil traditionally do.
The Israeli military is warning thousands of people to leave the south of Gaza as it tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Earlier, warnings saw scores of people move from the north of Gaza amid the escalating conflict. Leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time westward. Meanwhile, Israel says it'll allow 2 truckloads of fuel into Gaza each day, following international pressure. The White House wants larger quantities of fuel to be delivered on a regular basis. Elsewhere, major advertisers are pulling their business from X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Disney, Warner Brothers and US network NBC are among those who've paused their advertising. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy has turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year.
OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
And the creator of Wallace and Gromit and the Chicken Run films has enough clay for just one more film after its supplier ceased operations. When New Clay Products announced the closure of its facility near Torquay earlier this year, Aardman Animations quickly brought all its remaining stock. According to The Telegraph, the studio has just enough to complete its new Wallace and Gromit feature, due for release next year. New Clay produced a particular kind of plasticine, which is perfect for animating. Stop-motion artists say using the wrong kind would be like wearing the wrong trousers. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Tatiana. Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, it's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. In the middle of hate marches across the country, where some were calling for jihad, others were holding banners that were clearly racist, and a scarily large proportion of people were chanting from the river to the sea, which is deemed by Jewish people as anti-Semitic, the police were, in my view, worryingly tolerant. Which is odd, because in June, Staffordshire Police published a 12-page guidance document warning of discrimination through language and advised its officers not to use words such as man up, OAP or policeman. The document stated that discrimination through language causes offence, patronises and may be unlawful. Well, I don't disagree with the last sentiment. So what can be described as anti-Semitic chanting has widely been ignored and justified by the police is allowed, but in Staffordshire at least, calling a policeman, telling a colleague to man up and grow a pair, or using the term OAP could be deemed illegal. Seems a bit of a double standard, really. But the guidance also goes further with gender-based language. So instead of cleaning lady, cleaner should be used. Spokesperson instead of spokesman. Regarding religion, calling someone a Christian or Muslim should be replaced with Christian people and Muslim people. I mean, who has time for all of this when there is so much crime on our streets? A spokesperson for Staffordshire Police said that the guidance which has been issued after consultation with external consultants to ensure that everyone is treated with the utmost courtesy and respect. But surely the police have got enough on their hands without having to worry about hurty feelings through finicky language. No wonder so many officers are confused as to whether they are allowed to apprehend a suspect climbing a war memorial. I mean, what if they accidentally describe the person as a Muslim instead of a Muslim person? If those who set the standards for policing are so concerned, why don't they focus on actual policing, like getting our bobbies back? Well, probably can't say bobbies anymore. That's probably banned. Getting them back on the beat. Or how about reopening police stations and taking the admin out of the hands of the officers so they can get on with the job rather than little tweaks in language that only end up helping those they apprehend? Conservative MP Nigel Mills said, "You'd think the police have enough on their plate without spending time worrying about which perfectly acceptable normal language they can or can't use." So in the middle of this crisis in policing and dealing with peaceful hate marches where language is offensive and hateful, the police have to deal with this nonsense as well. To those who are wasting time on these ludicrous guidelines and turning our police force to mush, if you're that bothered about offensive language, put a stop to hateful chanting and protests, and for goodness sake, man up, grow a pair, and stop wasting time on double standard guidelines. Well, before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? After a lot of money spent and about 3 Home Secretaries within a few years, the Supreme Court has ruled that the government's Rwanda policy is unlawful. So today I'm asking, is it time just to shelve the thing altogether? I've got a poll up right now as well asking you that very question. It's on X. Check that out. You can also email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Then at 4:50 is Royal Roundup time. Royal biographer Angela Levin will be here with the latest from behind the palace walls. And on the menu, well, we've got the latest from The Crown, which covers the final weeks of Princess Diana's life. And the producers have faced criticism for portraying the events of 1997 and for too much creative licensing. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle reportedly moving on from the royal family drama, and she and Harry have distanced themselves from Omid Scobie's new book, just like what they did the last time. Also coming up at 5, it's my difficult conversation.
A new generation of drugs, or can be Simkevi and Kaftrio, is absolutely transforming the lives of patients with cystic fibrosis. So people who would have been waiting for double lung transplants now living happy, healthy lives. But NICE is now saying we can't afford them. So will the Prime Minister and his new Health Secretary get round the table with NICE and with the drugs company to make sure that children being born with cystic fibrosis today get those life-saving drugs in the same way that children currently living with CF are getting them?
Yeah. Well, that was Labour's Minister for Climate Change speaking to the Prime Minister for government intervention in making cystic fibrosis miracle drugs acceptable and accessible, to people who need it most. So at 5, I'll be speaking to Joseph, who is living with the condition and has been campaigning to make these drugs available. He's currently on the drug. You won't want to miss that. That is on the way in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former advisor to the Labour Party, Matthew Lazar. I didn't do Lala.
You didn't? I know. What have I done to deserve? I've done something. I've been good this week, have I?
I don't know, but there's still time.
There's still a lot of time.
I'm going to start with you, Lizzie Cundy. What do you think about this? Because this is language that they've been advised with regard to the police themselves, to each other, but also how they refer to us as the public.
Yeah, I'm actually so disappointed with the police and some Mark Rowley's words in the week. Mate, I was quite shocked and disappointed, and I'm actually going to call for him to get the sack. I think he's an absolute waste of space and so weak. Can we get the police back to policing? Look, I got caught up in these marches last Saturday. I'm very lucky to have made the show. They were hate marches. I heard the chants they were saying. I was even said, "Are you a Jew?" to me. I couldn't get past them. It was very frightening, and they had flares, and it was just dreadful. The police aren't doing enough. I'm sorry, and this is cultural vandalism, is what I call it. It's jumping on our sacred war memorials, and the police just stand there and do nothing. And it was just so...
They were talking about new laws to stop people from doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
If they'd gone on there and said something offensive, like misgendered the police officer or called one of... Remember that one who called the police officer, said that she looked like a lesbian? If she'd said that, then she'd be arrested for it. But don't worry about climbing on the statues. But what's your excuse for being late? You weren't...
I was just in time. I was just in time.
No,
there were
a few protests
there are more protests.
Is that your excuse?
Yes, it is, absolutely. It wasn't as bad as Lizzie's, but Just Stop Oil have managed to cause more oil consumption as the traffic grinds to a halt. No irony there. Look, I think it's perfectly reasonable for the police to have a look at how they treat different groups of people. I mean, look, we saw, the terrible case of Sarah Everard, the murderer from within the police force. We saw their failures with Stephen Port, serial killer of gay men. But no, absolutely, exactly. Nana, no, we're going to agree here. You might not call me Lala for the whole show, because what I find astounding about this is the Staffordshire Police, which is not one of the largest forces in the country, had to call in external consultants. Don't know why their language needs are different to every other of the 30-odd police forces around the country. How much the external consultants costing? Because it's not about language, it's about common sense. And that's what we all want in policing, isn't it? Good old-fashioned common sense. Yes, we live in a changed society. We want people to be conscious of things. We all know, going all the way back to Stephen Lawrence, how sometimes the police haven't been conscious of how they handle different communities. But that's quite different to saying that you can't... That if, of course, then you could write an official document, put police officer in. It's shorter than saying policeman and policewoman. But if somebody happens to say policeman, I mean, I'm worried we're going to have PC plot outside. Oh, my God, we're going to get arrested for your monologue, Nana.
I said man up, didn't I? Crikey, I'm in.
Exactly.
But you know what, though?
We'll be doing the second hour on our own.
Well, yeah, that'd be terrible. You'd probably be pleased with it.
Oh, never.
Take over.
Exactly. I know my place, Lizzie. I know my place, Lizzie and Nana.
It's very shocking with the police is that they're not policing anymore. And I've had a stalk for the last, 3 months. And all I've got is a reference number, which is not worth probably the paper it's written on, with no action. And I am really scared. I'm worried. I'm worried for my friends who are Jewish, who have to leave every weekend because of the marches. Why don't the police get back to what they're doing? Let's get the bobbies back on the street. Let them know their communities.
Are you sure you can call them that?
Oh, well, if we're allowed to
Is Bobby gender neutral? Maybe we should have a poll on that.
Bobby is
gender neutral, actually.
Get away with that. Well, do you know, I think a lot of the police officers who are doing this, or going on these courses, are probably rolling their eyes, thinking, why are we doing this? We want to get back to policing. So I think the police have a very hard job, and I don't even blame them. It's probably, how we have these awful training things. They say, come and do this training and that training. Even the things that you need, like fire safety, you sort of go, but you should do them. But this is another one, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, of course, the problem with things like this is you lose buy-in. If it becomes so ridiculous, if it seems so out of kilter with how people think. Talking of gender neutral, I was speaking to a former police officer, senior police officer, some former detective this week, and he said of the many things he's been called, like pig, most of them are gender neutral. But he usually follows it with "you're nicked."
But do you know what worries me? If Keir Starmer gets in, we're going to have more of this woke nonsense.
Well, I actually hope that we're not, but I mean, look, Labour's got to be careful, because if it's seen to go along with craziness like this, as I say, it's absolutely common sense to listen and to look at how society's changed and what you need to take into account to do your job properly. But language police we can do without.
Yeah, but I wonder if I've got that wonderful sketch of that policeman. I think it was at an LGBT or Pride event, and he was doing a little bit of body popping.
No. He was quite good at it.
He was very good at it, but I'm wondering if we had it, because we did get here.
There he is.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Oh, God.
Oh, no, this is a different...
This is a different one.
Oh, actually, he's not bad.
So he's doing some body popping, and then he's... Yeah.
Oh, no, it's quite good. He's very limber.
If you're watching this thing on radio, you must download the app or check this out on YouTube. Look at it.
He's body popping away. He's very limber. It's not that dancing.
We are laughing, but that is really sad. What are you doing? He's a police officer. What are you doing? This is becoming
that was even worse, because it didn't appear to be as though it was actually at an event or anything. It wasn't like Notting Hill at a carnival to try and, show you weren't, a force of the state. That was just looked like it was somebody's backyard.
It'll be on Britain's Got Talent next time round.
The problem with it is if we start allowing sort of turning our police force to mush, then this is what they end up doing. How can you have any respect for him if there's something going down?
But you've hit the nail on the head. Yeah, exactly. How can anyone really respect him and be scared of him? And they've got rainbow flags on their cars and doing the Macarena and those body popping dancing. It's just ridiculous. Can police get back to policing? And what's very, really sad, my friend who is a policeman said he hates the police. he hates what they stand for now. It really is a sorry state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it is, it's all about common sense. I think it's OK for the police to go on Pride marches if it doesn't take up much resources, if they're handing out a few recruitment leaflets, just as they go to other, you know, festivals and fairs. But then we don't have to see people bobby popping on Twitter, and because then you do lose respect.
Well, the one on, I mean, that was one of them, but there was another one at Carnival where he had a crowd all watching him.
Yeah.
If somebody had run through with a machete...
Exactly. It's one thing if they're marching off duty. Mostly at Pride marches, they used to march off duty. Now they're being paid to body pop. That's a bit different.
I mean, what is going on, please?
I want to see you two body pop before the end of the show. I can't.
I can do a bit. Should we do an electric shock?
No, I can't.
Come on. Oh, no,
I don't get...
Matthew, we got to... We're giving
some lessons.
Some practice in the break.
I ain't got rhythm.
We'll come back with one of those. Listen, if you just joined us, welcome on board. We're perfectly serious. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? Cast your vote now.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Can you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, a lot of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the topics that we've been discussing. With regard to the police, Rob says we really need to be policing the police. I really do not trust them. Joanna says the police have one of the hardest jobs in the world. People are way too harsh on them. They do need policing. They make mistakes just like every other human does. That is true. With regard to climate, Dimitri got in touch. He's told us off. He says Jim Dale always gets shouted down when he comes on, and he's the only one with real facts. If you take the time to research, you will see that termites do not produce anywhere near as much CO2 as humans. The soil samples and tree plant samples do actually show the increase in humans contaminating the world, and they are accurate, as they also accurately show when the first atomic bombs were set off. If it is a problem of our own causing. Now, that's interesting. Do you think so? Michael says this, which I thought was interesting. Have you taken this into account, though, Dimitri? Because Michael says, please can someone tell the eco-man, he means Jim Dale, that natural CO2 emissions come from geological activity. One volcanic eruption can emit as much CO2 as we create in 100 years. In any case, CO2 is not a greenhouse gas. It's a fertiliser, and we need more of it. That's what somebody says. What do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. Keep them coming. Right, it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? Well, the daughters of Paul Rusesabagina, I think I said that slightly wrong, but they're not here to tell me off. The real-life hero portrayed in the Hotel Rwanda, I don't know if you've seen that, have strongly criticised the Prime Minister's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, denouncing it as shocking. Now, the government, in response to a Supreme Court ruling, deemed its Rwanda asylum policy unlawful, is exploring emergency legislation and a new treaty with Rwanda. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? I mean, we've been going back and forth, back and forth. It's like that song. So joining me now is Peter Spencer, political commentator, Emma Burnell, journalist and consultant, and also Stephen Barrett, a barrister and writer. So first of all, then, I'm going to ask you, is it time, seriously, Stephen, I'm going to start with you. You're a barrister. You know the ins and outs of all of this. Is it time to scrap or axe this Rwanda plan?
Well, there's no need to scrap the plan as law. So what the Supreme Court made very clear, and what I want to make very clear to your viewers, is that we lawyers, law, is not taking a position on this plan. It was unlawful as it was set out because the proper administration hadn't been carried out. But had all that been done in advance, then the Supreme Court would have ruled that the plan was lawful. So you can have it if you want. I think it's then a policy question. Do you think this is what's going to stop the small boats? And most people seem to be sort of fixating on the idea of let's stop these small boats. But again, that's a policy position, so I'll be neutral if that's all right.
Yeah, OK, well, interesting. So, actually, it could have been deemed lawful if they've got their papers in order and if they were ready. Emma Burnell, you're a journalist and consultant. Do you think, then, having heard what Stephen said, that actually if they've got their papers in order, it would be deemed lawful and we could have got on with it? Even with that, do you think the plan should be axed?
Well, I've never been a fan of the plan. I'm not a fan of the policy decisions behind the plan. But even taking that aside, putting that aside, as somebody who advises on strategy, I think the problem with the plan now is that it's been proved that they can't deliver it. I think what Stephen said is very interesting. They had not done their homework. They hadn't done the background reading. They hadn't done the preparation they needed. And this is a plan that's been being talked about for years now. So it's not that they didn't have time to get this stuff in order. They clearly have not done enough work to get what I think is a stupid plan in the first place, but others absolutely disagree with me. Those who disagree with me should be more cross about this than I am, because they are the ones who think this would work. I don't. They're also the ones who think it's a good idea. I don't. Given those two things, those people have been let down the work. I, on the other hand, am possibly even more grateful for government incompetence because they're not doing what I think would be an unworkable, unsuccessful and ultimately quite cruel immigration plan.
Why do you see it as cruel? They're only going to Rwanda. What's wrong with Rwanda? Why is it cruel, Emma?
Well, because, as we have seen from the Supreme Court judgment, their cases would almost certainly not be properly looked at. And they could, as we saw with what happened with people from the Israel scheme, be sent back without their judgments being made properly. And, what we are talking about is people who should deserve to have a proper judgment. If they are then judged that they do not have a right to asylum, they can be sent away. If they are judged they have the right to asylum, they can't. And that is where this is a cruel scheme, because it was set out in such a way, so slack with people's lives and their...
Sorry, but it works on the premise that the whole people smuggling thing isn't cruel in itself. I mean, surely that's cruel in itself. I'm going to come to Peter Spencer.
Yeah, absolutely. To deal with the people smugglers, not the result of their actions.
All right, well, Peter Spencer.
I think there can be little doubt that had the Rwanda scheme gone ahead, it would have been a profound disincentive to anyone thinking of risking their lives in a small boat getting across the channel, because they then would have been faced with the distinct possibility that they'd be flown off to a country with an extremely dodgy record on human rights, and it's an impoverished country anyway, and no chance of getting back to UK. But as it turns out, Rishi Sunak has contrived to dig himself into a complete lose-lose hole over all this. First of all, he troubled those on the moderate wing of his party by letting Suella Braverman raise expectations and use all manner of language which many find offensive. And then after that, he switched over, sacked Suella Braverman, and lost the case in the Supreme Court anyway, thus enraging the right wing of his party. Now, the fact is, what's happening now is got this tapestry of ideas to make it happen anyway, but the reality is that hardly anyone thinks he can get this done because it is so complicated. There's not just the stinky judges in Strasbourg, but also all manner of United Nations things to which we're signed up that go back to the Second World War and the serious refugee crisis. The chances of his getting this through this time of the general election are pretty close to zero. And if, as the polls predict, the Labour Party get in, they'll ditch it anyway.
Stephen, do they have time to bring this back forward and get this through before, let's say, imagine the next general election is, let's call it January next year?
Yes, well, Parliament's going to dissolve on the 17th of December next year. That's all we can really say about a general election. And then there has to be a general election within a reasonably practical time after that dissolution. So that's what we can say. Our constitution is more than capable of working at pace to make this lawful if you want. And I want to explain a concept. I've been trying to think about how to explain it best to you. When we worry about the UN treaties and the UN ideas and these international law ideas, we only worry about them because they're incorporated into our law. They're put into the UK law. Think of them like helium balloons, and we have used Parliament to put a peg and stick them in the ground, and they stay in our country because of that act of Parliament. Take that peg out, and off the balloon will float to a realm we don't care about. And the only law that matters is the law of the UK. We had another court judgment from the Court of Appeal, which is very, very important this week. And a lovely line came out of it, which is said that no one is above the law, including a court. And what that means is that everyone is subject to Parliament. So Parliament can fix the Rwanda plan, come up with an alternative to the Rwanda plan, or do nothing. And it's really your personal political opinion which of the three you want to do. I mean, I don't know if I've got time to explain what the EU is doing, but they push boats back to Libya, and there are very, very big risks, and a lot of people are concerned about Libya. It's a failed state. It's not like Rwanda. It's very, very dangerous. You know, at the Polish border, there's fences and water cannon, and boats are being pushed at Greece back to Turkey. What are we going to do is a political question, but I think it's sounding like we are going to have to do something.
All right, well then, thank you very much, all of you. But briefly, Peter Spencer, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan then, yes or no? Is it time, yes, no?
He might just as well.
He might as well. Yeah, Emma Burnell, yes or no, time to axe it?
Long since passed, but yes.
Yeah, and Stephen, I don't think you're going to give me an answer, but
No, sorry, Nana. That's all right.
But it's fair enough.
Not
It's fair
for
enough.
me.
I respect the thoughts as well, because we need that. Stephen Barrett, thank you very much, barrister and writer. Emma Burnell, journalist and consultant, and also Peter Spencer, political commentator. Thank you for your thoughts. Well, what do you think? You're watching at home and listening on the radio. Do you think it's time to axe the plan? You've heard that it could actually go forward. Why not? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.com. Coming up, it's time for the Great British Debate. We'll continue. I'm asking, is it time to axe the plan? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, Lizzie Cundy and Matthew Larzer. And still to come, this week's difficult conversation. Got a very special guest that you won't want to miss. But first, let's get your latest news with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Around 250 pro-Palestine protesters have gathered outside Downing Street. It's after a demonstration earlier this afternoon that saw some marchers describing Israel as a terror state.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terror state!
These pictures show Camden in North London, where you can see demonstrators waving Palestinian flags. Protests were also taking place in Bristol, where GB News reporter Jeff Moody has been following the day's events.
Calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
At least 4 arrests have been made as Just Stop Oil protesters hold a People versus Oil demonstration in the capital. Activists met at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. They're marching against the approval of more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government's imprisoning peaceful protesters while protecting those who it describes as climate criminals. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement after a fall in inflation. It's understood Jeremy Hunt is considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now back to Nana.
Thank you, Tatiana. Coming up, royal biographer Angela Leppin will be live in the studio with the latest from behind the palace walls in my royal roundup. As the final season of The Crown has been released, she's watched it. She can tell you all about it. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? That is coming up. I've got a poll up right now next asking that very question. But we will continue with the debate now. Tell me your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome aboard. If you've just tuned in, 39 minutes after 4 o'clock, I'm going to say hello to Beverly Callard. She said she's in Turkey and she's just seen us on TV, so we're live on TV, online and in Turkey. So hello, Beverly. But welcome back. If you've just tuned in, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? Well, the government, in response to the Supreme Court ruling deeming that Rwanda's asylum policy is unlawful, is exploring emergency legislation and a new treaty with Rwanda. And this, of course, comes as former Home Secretary Suella Braverman was sacked earlier this week with a very scathing letter as well that she put forward. But Rishi Sunak has pledged to proceed with these plans. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, also former Labour advisor Matthew Lauser. Matthew Lauser, I'm going to start with you. What do you think? Rwanda plan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's time to scrap the Rwanda plan. We've had £140 million of taxpayers' money spent so far, and more Home Secretaries than refugees have been visiting Rwanda. Zero asylum seekers and a lot of Home Secretaries, too many to lose count. And I think, you said Suella's letter was scathing, and it certainly was, because the Suella quote is a wasted year to end up back at square one. We do need to tackle the small boats crisis. We need a proper plan and not this gimmick which the Tories are pursuing, and which now, even if they rush the legislation through, we've seen Suella herself in her second intervention in her article that followed a couple of days later has said that there's no way it's going to happen before the election. It's all about politics, when what we need is a plan to stop the boats.
But Stephen said that we could get this legislation through really quickly if we really wanted to, and actually the reason it failed was simply because they hadn't done their admin properly. Now, Suella presided over all of that, so I as much as I love Suella Braverman, even though I had a very embarrassing moment, you know about it, Suella, we both know it's so bad.
Are you going to share, or is it come when you've got to? You can't tease us.
Well, anyway, so it was, we were doing some filming, Suella was there. I waited because I wanted to meet her. I know, Suella, we did them, while we did it. Then she did the interview. Then I wanted to get my picture. I forgot that I'd already done the moi. I wanted to do it again, and she literally went, just help me back, as it was, get this woman away.
It is tricky when... Yeah,
PTSD.
Oh, well, I had that with Joan Collins.
It comes in the middle of the night.
Oh, God, I'm so embarrassed.
Yeah. No, look, well, Suella would say that she had tried... I mean, I don't know, I'm defending Suella here. That's not normally my job. But Suella says that she tried to point out the problems with the existing legislation to Rishi, and he wouldn't listen, i.e. that he was she's effectively accusing him of having sabotaged his own legislation by not closing the loopholes that they all knew were going to get close down. The problem is the House of Lords are going to block it.
But isn't she in charge of that, though?
Well, she's not. I mean, she's in charge of saying it, but ultimately the Prime Minister decides what.
The crux lies with him. Well, you talked about the letter, resignation letter. Was it? Well, she was sacked, but it was more like a political assassination, wasn't it? It really was.
Have you seen how many people have seen it? It's like 35 million views or something.
I mean, it's incredible. And as she said, he broke promises. You know, and should we be surprised that the snake has bitten again? Because look what he did to Boris and stabbing him in the back, saying, you know, ready for Rishi. He's known to break his promises, sadly. And it is ironic that the only one that really took the flight from Rwanda was Suella. But I mean, I wish the Supreme Court had given me a call, because they've got their facts totally wrong. Because Rwanda is safe. It's actually a lot safer than this country. And I've got some facts for you, because you know I deal in only facts.
We love when the glasses go on.
Listen, in Kuali, increasing in London crime is up 63%, Kuali 22. Drug problem, London 62%, Kuali 24%. Violent crimes 57%, Kuali 22.5. Just walking home at night, you are more safer in Kuali by 69%. So where have the Supreme Court got their facts from? And you know about the Supreme Court? How were they created? With under New Labour. Tony Blair and his cronies.
They're not saying that Rwanda isn't safe. What they're saying is that Rwanda would send back too many people who were asylum seekers potentially to other countries that weren't safe. So that because about 50% of people within the asylum system in Rwanda get sent back. So their argument is not that you're not safe if you're on the streets of Rwanda,
but you're... one, isn't it? Because before they were saying it wasn't. I mean,
well, they do keep finding different reasons.
They keep finding reasons. I'm going to be blatantly honest.
They'll find another one.
I think it's because the people there are black, and I think that they have this vision that this is, you know, they're savage or something that's wrong with Rwanda. Rwanda is one of the most beautiful places in Africa. It's known as the Jewel, and it has some fantastic scenery and everything else like that. We met Coco, who's married to Simon Danship. She's lovely. She said the people are beautiful there. I should imagine that it's probably safer, I think, than here, but I also suspect that there is some reason. I think there's sort of a race element to it.
But I agree with you. I think there is a race element to it, and I think it's actually shocking that they're saying this.
Because Italy's going to have similar camps in Albania, and Italy's not only in the ECHR, but it's also got the EU as well. So it's got two sets of European courts. We've only got one now, and I wonder if we'll see some judgments there where people have a knee-jerk reaction against.
But we're getting ruled by foreign judges. I've said from the start, get rid of the ECHR. I've always said this, but we have 7 other legislations and conventions still got to pass. Rishi has to keep saying, doesn't he? He keeps saying those. I'll do everything in my power. He has to do something, and we need action. And the fact is, Suella's hands were tied. Well, you know, he didn't seem to care about it or not care enough.
And he wants to make room for Dave, which we, you know, bring back my mate Dave, Mr. Cameron.
But we have a way, you know, that's £140 million of our money.
Yeah,
and don't forget, that barge is still sitting there floating with only 6 people on it.
Listen, I don't think that 140 million actually, because if it was something else for education or everything, they would say, it's just a drop in the ocean, don't they, when it's anything else?
But if it was money for education, it might have actually been spent in schools. This has been spent on 0 people so far.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, a figure like that would have been quoted as a drop in the ocean. So my deal is this: it's 80 million a day. 140 million, I don't think is that much. It's considering what we're paying.
For 8 million a day for the hotels.
And the rolling cost of it. Suzanne from Bury says, get them there, get them fast, get them out. People who muck up system should go out. That's what Suzanne says. She's there in Bury. Philip says it's totally immoral. I get we have to do something, but Rwanda, really? Philip, have you ever been to Rwanda? Probably no. And Stephen says, if they axe Rwanda, do they have a plan B or C? The whole approach is pitiful.
Well, Suella says they haven't got a plan B, have they?
Well,
it's magical thinking.
I understand why Lee Anderson is saying get the plane off.
In your views, let's welcome our Great British Voices. I hope we've got our little move onto the show. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Where should we go today?
The map is back! Somebody's career is saved.
We know where Lee is.
You know, heads were about to roll if it wasn't there. Lee, what do you think? Is it time to axe the Rwanda plan?
Hi, Nana. I say this with desperation in my voice. No, I don't think we should act the plan. In principle, the Rwanda plan working with terror is still a reasonable idea. If legal migrants believe they're 1,000 miles away in Rwanda, it will obviously make them think twice about paying thousands of pounds to criminal gangs. As we know, similar removal schemes have worked in Australia and more recently here in the UK. It's worked very well for migrants from Albania. The problem is, Nana, and it is a big one, is I believe we have been lied to, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. After reading Suella's letter, to me, it is very clear that Rishi Sunak is a spineless, backstabbing, two-faced liar who has absolutely no intention of delivering
out of my mouth.
anything he promised. You know, Suella warned about the problems we faced in the courts and provided a plan B, which he promised to implement in return for Suella's support when he was running for the leadership. And he's betrayed that agreement and completely ignored it. And he sent the country a big signal when he sacked Suella Braverman, who was a true conservative, and brought back David Cameron, a hardcore Remainer, you know, really
dinosaur.
You know, this was the final straw for me. We warned that it would be an idiotic move, and since then the polling has taken a nosedive. Just to finish on this, one thing I am absolutely certain of is trust has now completely evaporated. I now truly believe that Sunak has absolutely no intention of stopping votes in any meaningful way until those flights.
Listen, Lee, your audio's going a bit. I don't know whether it's us or you. Listen, Lee, your audio's going. It's usually very good. It's probably us, so we'll blame ourselves here. Lee, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. That's Lee Harris. He's our great British voice. But what do you think? Keep your thoughts coming. gbviews@gbnews.com. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua, live on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, this week's difficult conversation. A very special guest who's campaigning to make cystic fibrosis miracle drugs available to people who need it most. You won't want to miss that. But up next, Angela Levin will be live. But first, let's get some weather.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead, it's going to be another unsettled day on Sunday with some further rain to come on Monday too, but then hopefully it will start to turn a bit drier, but colder as we head towards the middle of next week. Back to here and now, we have got this huge area of low pressure really dominating proceedings. That's bringing in some further rain this evening across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland. Some of that will be quite heavy in places. Drier and clearer initially for a good chunk of England and Wales, but then later on in the night we will then start to see rain return here too. Quite blustery down towards the far southwest of the country and also up across the Northern Isles, but with all the cloud and wind around, it's going to be a mild one for most of us. Temperatures at lowest probably around 4 to 5 degrees in the north. So really Sunday is going to be a fairly unsettled day, a mixture of showers or longer spells of rain. There will be some brightness around. Maybe the best of that will be across eastern Scotland as we go into the afternoon. But despite the cloud and rain, it will be another mild one. Temperatures in the south reaching around 14 or 15 degrees, so maybe a shade cooler than what we have seen today. Into Monday, you can see further rain on the charts for most of us. In between, there will be some brightness around, and as we go through into Tuesday and Wednesday, the drier theme will become increasingly widespread with an increasing amount of sunshine. But for most of us, temperatures will be trending away.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, just fast approaching 54 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. Coming up, the great British debate, I'll be asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? We've seen Suella sacking people, being sacked, and the Tories suffering unfavourable decisions and so on and so forth. So what do you think? But next up, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. And on the menu, the fabulous Angela Levin. What has been going on? We've had Netflix, they've released the latest series of The Crown, which covers the final weeks of Princess Diana's life, and the producers have faced criticism for portraying events of 1997. Meghan Markle as well, she's apparently moving away from the whole royal family drama. Well, there's so much to unpack. Thankfully, royal biographer Angela Levin will be doing that for us right now. Angela.
Hello, there is a lot, so I'll talk succinctly and quick.
I won't interrupt. That's code for shut up.
We'll go backwards. Meghan was actually out at some do, and she did all the turn right, turn left, and she said what she really wants to do now, huge smile, was to make people feel. And I burst out laughing because I thought,
feel what?
Feel what? What does she actually mean? But I think it was one of those woke sort of things. And she was wearing beige, which she made a huge complaint about, that she said the royal family made her because they didn't want her to use any bright colour. So here we have Miss Hypocrite again. And if she really doesn't want to belong to the royal family, why is she hanging on like death for the titles and for the titles for her children? So I think we just have to wait and see. I think a lot of these things I am going to do actually never come to any good. But she was excited to be there without Harry, of course, just smiling and looking this way and that and trying to look as happy as possible. Right?
So what about, have you watched The Crown? I'm presuming
I watched all 6 episodes on Thursday.
Come on then.
Yes, and some of it was interesting, some of it was moving, but what was a killer at the end was Diana, who had died, and she comes back as a ghost. Now, she's not a ghost in a sort of misty cloud. She's wearing a no-sleeve top, and she sits down in front of Charles, wearing the same earrings and the hairdo and everything that she'd worn before, and she said that she really, really loved him, and it will always stay with her, and how his tears in the hospital when he looked at her and saw her will always make her feel glad. I thought that was appalling.
Oh, so who was she talking to?
Charles.
OK, really? I just suddenly thought that I've always loved you and all this.
Yes.
Bit...
Well, it was a sort of nonsense way. And then she goes into where the Queen is sitting, and she has a chat with the Queen as well. And it is so phony. It is so unpleasant. It is so crude and vulgar.
I don't mean to laugh, because I'm thinking, does she also chat to Meghan Markle as well in her ear?
Off you go. She wouldn't take...
Clear off, leave my son alone.
Yes. But other things that they made, there was always something nasty about all the characters. I mean, Charles was weak and often crying. The Queen didn't know whether she was coming or going. The Duke of Edinburgh was very tough, didn't want Camilla anywhere near them, but said it in a very crude way, and didn't want Charles to use a Rob aircraft to bring Diana's body back. Camilla looked a bit of a scrubber because all you saw of her was, nothing very much, and putting her feet on Charles's desk. So I thought it was really quite tasteless.
What about Harry? What did they do to Harry?
Well, poor old Harry had the tiniest little part, and he was just with his brother, and his brother spoke to his mother first before he did, so he was a little bit upset about that. And that's about it, really. He was barely in it. He didn't want to be in it, and I think he got his way, but he had no impact at all.
I thought he was portrayed as somebody who was drinking and things like that, and did they not portray him?
They mentioned that he was a bit of a rogue, but you didn't see him drinking, you didn't see him doing anything, really. He was really hardly on. He was one of the low attendants on that.
For now?
For now. Well, I don't think he'll want the Crown to do another part on him, actually. What was good was that when Charles rushed to France to see, what had happened to Diana, and we weren't shown her at all, he looked over what was obviously a bed and then cried. And I thought that was subtle, because we didn't want to see her with her face smashed in and anything like that. So that was a subtle move. So I give that 1 tick.
Really? 1 tick? Is that it?
Yes.
Oh, God. Oh, dear. Anything else on the menu?
As for Scobie...
Oh, yes, Scobie. Scooby-Doo, we like
Scooby-Doo. He has been incredibly unpleasant about the royal family. He said very nasty things. He said William was absolutely fed up with his brother, and he went ahead and was working with the television, the press, to give him all the publicity and not Harry. Well, what an awful thing to say. What an unfair thing to say. A lot of the words he says about Harry, I found was exactly the opposite of what Harry said to me. So I think it's... Harry and Meghan say they don't belong to it, they have nothing to do with it. I don't believe a word of that either.
Angela Levin, well, we must...
Very cynical.
Well, I look forward to hearing our next Royal Roundup. That is, of course, royal biographer Angela Levin. She wrote Prince Harry's biography. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. It's 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up in just a few moments' time, I'll be speaking to a young man called Joseph, who's been campaigning for cystic fibrosis miracle treatment drugs to be made available to children who need it most. And then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics, where we're witnessing a Tory and Labour party in crisis, SNP in shambles, and don't get me started on the Lib Dems. So I'm asking, is it now time for a new main party in British politics? But first, let's get your latest news with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. There's a large police presence at Waterloo Station in London as pro-Palestine protesters appear to be staging a sit-in. Officers are handing out notices and urging people to leave the area. The British Transport Police say anyone who breaches the Public Order Act will be arrested. Well, it's been days of protests across the UK with more pro-Palestine marches taking place in London and in Bristol.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terrorist state!
These scenes were captured in North London this afternoon. As you can hear, some protesters were heard describing Israel as a terror state. Elsewhere, there were reports of around 200 protesters at London Bridge Station. Large demonstrations were also seen in Bristol, where Jeff Moody has been following events.
Calling this a national day of action, and there's certainly plenty of action here in Bristol. We think there's something around 5,000 people that have taken to the streets today in Bristol. They're taken to the streets not just here, but in 100 different cities and towns across our country. And the aim of today is for, as the organisers say, for ordinary people to voice their opinion and to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. So far, it's been a peaceful protest, plenty of banners, plenty of anger, plenty of debate on the streets, but so far the police have been policing this with a light touch, and that does seem to have paid off.
At least 4 arrests were made during a Just Stop Oil protest in London today. Activists met at the London Eye near the Shell headquarters. They marched against the approval of more than 100 new oil and gas projects. The group says the government's imprisoning peaceful protesters while protecting those who it describes as climate criminals. The Israeli military is warning thousands of people to leave the south of Gaza as it tightens its focus on Hamas terrorists there. Earlier warnings saw scores of people move from the north of Gaza. Amid the escalating conflict, leaflets have been dropped by the IDF near the Khan Yunis area, telling people to move again, this time westward. Meanwhile, Israel says it will allow 2 truckloads of fuel into Gaza each day following international pressure. It's after the UN warned of rapidly deteriorating conditions and a mounting risk of starvation. The White House wants larger quantities of fuel to be delivered on a regular basis. Major advertisers are pulling their business from X, formerly known as Twitter, amid a row over alleged anti-Semitism. It comes after the site's owner, Elon Musk, appeared to endorse a post that falsely claimed members of the Jewish community were stoking hatred against white people. The White House called it an abhorrent promotion of anti-Semitic and racist hate. Disney, Warner Brothers and US network NBC are among those who've paused their advertising. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement, arguing the economy has turned a corner. Jeremy Hunt says this is the moment to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. It's understood he's considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election.
OBR numbers and forecasts will be published on Wednesday at the autumn statement. But there is no easy route to reducing the tax burden. The way we do it is by spending taxpayers' money more wisely, and that means having more productive public services.
And finally, the creator of Wallace and Gromit and the Chicken Run films has enough clay for just one more film after its supplier ceased operations. When New Clay Products announced the closure of its facility near Torquay earlier this year, Aardman Animations quickly brought all its remaining stock. According to The Telegraph, the studio has just enough to complete its new Wallace and Gromit feature, due for release next year. New Clay produced a particular kind of plasticine which is perfect for animating. Stop-motion artists say using the wrong kind would be like wearing the wrong trousers. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. Still to come, my difficult conversation.
A new generation of drugs, or can be Simkevi and Kaftrio, is absolutely transforming the lives of patients with cystic fibrosis. So people who would have been waiting for double lung transplants now living happy, healthy lives. But NICE is now saying we can't afford them. So will the Prime Minister and his new Health Secretary get round the table with NICE and with the drugs company to make sure that children being born with cystic fibrosis today get those life-saving drugs in the same way that children currently living with CF are getting them?
Yeah. That was Labour's Minister for Climate Change speaking to the Prime Minister and demanding more intervention in making cystic fibrosis miracle drugs accessible to people who need it most. Shortly I'll be speaking to Joseph, who's living with the condition and has fortunately been lucky enough to get the drug, but he's been campaigning to make these drugs available to younger children. You won't want to miss out. That is on the way next. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? Now, the political landscape is witnessing significant developments. The Tory party is facing internal turmoil, eating itself from the inside out. Meanwhile, Labour have acquired an astonishing 30-point lead over the Conservatives, even though they're undergoing internal drama of their own. The SNP have money troubles. Of course, remember the whole debacle with Nicola Sturgeon and now Humza Useless. And the Lib Dems are, well, enough said about them. I mean, is their banner yellow or is it orange? So is it time for a new main party in British politics? And for my mini-debate, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says difficult decisions will need to be made as the government prepares for next week's autumn statement, and reports suggest that he's looking into slashing inheritance tax and levies on businesses. So what impact will this have on people up and down the country? Is it time for the government to slash inheritance tax? Does it affect you? As ever, you can get in touch in the usual way. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So it's now time for this week's difficult conversation. During the Prime Minister's questions, the Shadow Minister for Climate Change, Kerry McCarthy, challenged Rishi Sunak on making cystic fibrosis treatment drugs more accessible to babies born with the condition. Have a quick listen.
A new generation of drugs, or can be Simkevi and Kaftrio, is absolutely transforming the lives of patients with cystic fibrosis. So people who would have been waiting for double lung transplants now living happy, healthy lives. But NICE is now saying we can't afford them. So will the Prime Minister and his new Health Secretary get round the table with NICE and with the drugs company to make sure that children being born with cystic fibrosis today get those life-saving drugs in the same way that children currently living with CF are getting them?
Prime Minister, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising an important issue. I'll of course ask the Health Secretary to look into it. I shall understand that NICE operates independently from government, but if there's a conversation that can be had, I'll ensure that it takes place.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak speaking this week in Prime Minister's Questions. Well, I'm joined in the studio by campaigner Joseph Lamberti, who was born with cystic fibrosis and has been campaigning to make treatment drugs more accessible and affordable. Welcome, Joseph. Really nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Because I heard about this drug because I am a maths addict and I'm married at first sight, Australia, and there was one girl on it who had CF, but then a few years previous was given this wonder drug that literally makes the condition almost as though it's cured. You're on the drug.
I am.
Talk to me about what it was like for you living with the condition and the difference before the drug,
So, before the drug, everybody with cystic fibrosis, every case is different. It's important to stress that. But before the drug, when I was a child, things were tough. Chronic chest infections, a small barrack's worth of medication and antibiotics, frequent long-term trips into hospital for IV antibiotics. And that put a lot of pressure on my own parents. My mother pretty much had to sacrifice her career to make sure that she could, look after me and maintain my health. So things were tough, but it's the drug. Like I say, it's not a cure, but it's a cure in almost every other possible way, unless you want to start talking about gene therapy. It subdues all the side effects and ailments of cystic fibrosis, so we can live a normal life, or as normal, what is normal, but, you know.
So what is cystic fibrosis? I mean, a lot of people know it's a lung condition, but what exactly is happening in the lungs?
So cystic fibrosis, as I understand it, and I'm not a doctor, but it's a hereditary condition. So it's not those of us that suffer with it. It's not through lifestyle choices. It's not you are born with this illness, and it's a disease that's spread through genes, and you have to inherit both genes from both sets of parents, and it affects, like I say, mainly the lungs and the dietary system. And what's happening in the lungs is, as I understand it, we all produce salt within our cells, and there's a protein that my cells just simply either don't produce or they don't produce enough of. And that's different for everybody with cystic fibrosis, depending on the genes that you've got, because there's a variety of different genes, there's gene variations. So that, and it affects every organ in the body, and therefore it affects everybody with cystic fibrosis slightly differently. But yeah, you're right, the lungs, we produce more mucus, and the mucus that we do produce, we all produce it, ours is slightly thicker, which means that our lungs are more susceptible to chest infections, etc., and that's really where it starts. And then, from then on, that lung damage that can be caused, and is caused frequently, then becomes obviously permanent, and that's when you can often, like I say, the lungs get weaker over time. And
so is it like a scarring of the lungs that continues?
Well, like I say, I'm not a doctor, but
so basically your lung capacity kind of reduces because of the mucus?
Yes, so over
end...
time, after chronic infection, the lung capacity will reduce over time to the point that, unfortunately, you have to go and be put on the transplant list.
Because I know somebody who had I think it might have been a heart and lung transplant. Is that what it's a double transplant? Yeah, so the two things get transplanted. What do they normally transplant if it's...
It's typically, again, I've not got much knowledge in this area. I've been thankful enough not to be exposed to this sort of conversation with doctors, but I believe typically it's the lung transplant now. Like I said, I do not know how that works, but yeah, it's a lung transplant. When things get really bad, the only option is a lung transplant.
And that doesn't even cure it from the rest of your body, just it?
No, it doesn't. Well, it doesn't even. It doesn't cure it from the rest of your body. It's a faulty gene within every cell of our body. So a cure would be like a move to gene therapy.
So you seem to have coped relatively well. Were you a sickly child, or did it not affect you? How badly did it affect you?
No, it absolutely affected me. Like I said, every case is different. I was fortunate enough to have great foundations from my own parents. I've got great friends. I've got great family, a great partner at home as well, But yeah, so it did affect me, absolutely. Like I said, the chronic lung infections. There was a period in my life when it seemed sort of every Christmas I was in for a 2 or 3 week stint of IVs in the Children's Hospital, which isn't particularly pleasant. And what that does moving forward is it can obviously affect. When your health is affected. Well, I always say that if somebody's not got the health, they haven't got anything.
No.
And it affects, once your health's affected and you're having to divert attention from just living to focus on your health, it affects everything, especially when you're a child. It's, your social skills, your education, all that, everything, it kind of snowballs.
So this new drug, talk to me about this new drug, how you got hold of it and why it's not going to be available to, or potentially not available to others.
So it's important to stress at the moment we don't know exactly what's going to happen. NICE have recommended that whilst it's a fantastic drug at reducing the side effects of having cystic fibrosis, they've deemed it cost ineffective, I should say. So the drug itself is a cure in every sense. I mean, it isn't a cure, so I've used the wrong word there, but in every sense it's a cure.
You don't suffer with the...
What it allows again, I'm not a doctor, but what it allows our bodies to do is, within the cell, it actually allows access to the protein I was talking about before, and allows it, providing our body makes that protein. Again, it all depends slightly on the genes that you've got and the genes that you inherit. And that's why there are, I think there's 3 different types of drug available, but they all essentially function in the same way, that they inhibit the cells to release the protein, and once that protein is released, the other side effects we're talking about, which is essentially the excess, the extra salt and mucus, it reduces that, and therefore, like I say, internally on the inside, you've got a fighting chance to be as good as everybody else.
So now you're on the drug. Do you have a pretty normal life? I mean, do you have to suffer all the ailments now? Has it literally transformed your life?
It has. It has quite literally transformed my life. I mean, like I say, every winter, typically before the drug was accessible, I was on a rolling course of antibiotics, simply because without them I'd be, I'd catch a cold, drop to the throat, drop to the chest, then I'd be in serious trouble. And for me, someone that's always, as long as I could be, has tried to maintain a reasonable level of health and fitness. The drug for me has most greatly affected my lungs and that reliance on. I no longer rely on a stream of antibiotics, so I'm now not on any antibiotics. I don't take any sort of saline nebulizer or anything like that.
Well, this is you running. I mean, you're running and doing stuff now.
That was the Great North Run in 2022.
Wow.
And I did that for the Cystic Fibrosis Trust, which is a charity that raises money to support families and children as they're sort of starting on their CF journey, and they do all sorts of incredible research for the CF community.
So you're campaigning now to make sure this drug is available for people. I mean, they need to make it available because all the things that the effects in your development, the treatment that you'll have to go through if you didn't have it, surely that would cost way more than...
Well, yeah.
And what you'll contribute to society because you're with us to do that.
Yeah, so that's one of the arguments I'd like to come on here and make the case for. The first one is that, as you've just said then, if you accumulate the total cost of... I mean, again, I don't know how much it costs precisely to run a ward or to run nurses, etc. But if you were to take all of that and add all that up, like I said earlier, the barrage of medication that you have to take, if you add all of that up accumulatively, it's got to be more expensive. We've got to be looking at this as like you've just said then as well. The economics of the argument, for me, don't quite stack up. And I'm, like I said, I'm well enough, I'm fit enough, I'm fortunate enough to be a contributing member of society. I've got a great job, that are very supportive.
So if people want to help, then, is there a website or something they can go to? Is there some campaigning thing? Where can they go?
So there's a petition doing the rounds at the moment to make sure that this is discussed and to make sure that it is reviewed in Parliament properly and the NICE recommendation isn't implemented.
Where can people sign up to that?
That is on the petitions.gov website. I'll put a link as well onto my social media today. And
if people want to find you, where can they find you on social media?
To find me on social media, it's just quite simply Joseph Lamberti on Instagram. That's where I do a lot of stuff. And I'll put the link on there. And really, it's about, like I say, spreading that awareness, spreading the message. There are some really influential people in the world, or in this country, that have got, a massive amount of... a large voice. There's people like Gordon Brown, I'm thinking of Richard Madeley.
Wonderful. So you've got quite a bit of support. Listen, Joseph, we're running out of time, but it's so good to talk to you.
No, thank you for the time.
People will find you on your social media. Joseph Lamberti is what they look for.
Thank you.
And you'll put the link there for the petition.
I will put the link there, and like I said, let's try and make this as loud as possible.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Joseph.
you.
Lovely to talk to you. That is, of course, Joseph Lamberti. He's campaigning for cystic fibrosis medication to be available on the NHS for those who need it. Now, stay tuned, because coming up, my quickfire quiz around... we round up the facts and myths. We'll be doing that. Up next, though, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? You don't want to miss it. It's on the way next.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 24 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News. Don't forget, you can also stream us live on YouTube or download the GB News app. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? Now, the UK political landscape is witnessing significant developments. The Tory party is facing internal turmoil, eating themselves from the inside out. Rishi Sunak pushing ahead with the Rwanda policy that apparently, if he just made a few amendments, could have got it through the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, it was ruled unlawful. We've also seen Lord Cameron make a return, a dinosaur. I mean, bless his heart, but really, seriously, he created Brexit and then ran away, didn't he? The Labour Party also struggling to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. You've seen the turmoil within their party. I wonder how Keir Starmer hopes to lead the country when he's struggling to lead his own party. Then over in Scotland, lots of money troubles for the SNP and, of course, the good old Lib Dems. Don't get me started on them. Even in Northern Ireland, you've got Stormont who aren't sitting. It's so many things going on. So for this hour's Great British Debate, I'm asking, is it time for a new main party in British politics? Well, I'm joined now by Ben Habib. He's Deputy Leader for Reform UK. Dr Philip Kisley, cultural historian. Roger Giwalt, former advisor to the Bank of England. I've missed somebody. Who's missing from my list? Is that 4 people? There's somebody else there. That's everybody. All right, well, I'll start with you. Roger, please start first. What do you think?
Well, I think everything you say is right. I mean, both parties, the whole political scene here in the UK, you couldn't make it up. You couldn't write it. It's a West End play. And what will happen, I don't know. But, Rishi is certainly backtracking on all sorts of things. The statements from Chancellor Hunt over and over that we don't have the money for the tax cuts. I have been saying for many, many, many months that we do, since last November when he said there was a £55 billion black hole, which I didn't believe. Of course we have the money for tax cuts, and I always said they would come just before, general election time came up. Do we need a new political party? Yes, it would be great if we could have a party that had people that were different and that weren't professional politicians, you know, kind of in it for themselves and not thinking about us. I think they're all so divorced from the common Brit that it's frightening.
Well, it does seem a shocker, really, frankly. All right, Dr. Philip Kistley, what do you think?
Yes, I think it's difficult to hold the Conservative Party in anything other than contempt because they hold us in contempt. They lie to us all the time. Not only do they lie, they do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. So if they say that they're going to deal with mass immigration will actually go up. If they say they're going to deal with genderism in schools, then we'll have more genderism in schools. So they hold us in contempt. There is space for a new major party. There desperately needs to be a major party. There needs to be conviction politics. There needs to be a party that deals with culture, the big issues, which are cultural issues, and we don't have a major party doing that at the moment. We have a couple of smaller parties doing that. We have the SDP and we have Reform here, but we need those parties to step up and gain confidence and be bigger.
Because it just doesn't seem... It just seems a bit of a mess. Jerry Hayes, sorry I didn't mention you, Jerry. Jerry, you're there. Jerry, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it depends what happens at the general election. It looks at the moment like the Tories are going to be in trouble at the general election. And then we get someone like Suella Braverman, who's leading the... I'm getting terrible feedback here. I don't think I'm meant to be.
Just keep talking. We can hear you, Jerry. Don't worry.
That's all right. If the Tory party suddenly becomes a right-wing clique and people like me, the One Nation Tories, are excluded, then there will be a total change in the political landscape. But I'm not so sure that's going to happen. If you have someone like Kemi Badenoch, then people like me can stay in the Conservative Party. But it's very difficult for a party, a new party, to be successful. The only party which has been successful in the past was the SDP, and they were pretty well non-aligned. They were not professional politicians. And everyone forgets that in 1983, they were very, very close to becoming the opposition. They're about 400,000 votes. What I look out for, which I think is very dangerous, is George Galloway. George Galloway is going to harness the Muslim vote.
I can't take him seriously after he played the cat in Big Brother.
Oh, yeah, but a lot of people, I agree. It's terrible. Banana. You know, that's one side that's worrying. It's hopelessly divided the Labour Party.
All right, well, Ben Habib, he says that George Galloway, watch out for him. McCavity. What do you think, Ben?
Well, I am deputy leader of Reform UK, and I only joined Reform UK because I came to the conclusion that neither of the main parties are going to deliver for this country. I mean, if you look at both the main parties, they both believe in large state intervention, they both believe in large state borrowing, large state spending, high taxation. Neither party wishes or is able to control immigration. As one of the previous speakers said, there's a complete blind spot on culturalism and the culture of the United Kingdom, promoting it and protecting it. And this is not just a cultural debate when we talk about culture. We're actually talking about the heart of the nation, the homogeneity, the happiness and settlement of British people. And there's only one party, frankly, that does that, which is Reform UK. And we are already getting to be a main party. This week, after the Suella Braverman meltdown, we've polled in double digits on 4 separate opinion polls. And so we're going to present a real threat to the Conservative Party, a real threat to the Labour Party in the next election, and we are going to deliver policies which will economically charge the United Kingdom and protect the cultural integrity of it. One of the things that Suella Braverman said that was so right was that this country is facing an existential threat, and we've been taken there by the Labour Party, followed by the Conservative Party. They've had their day. They need to get out of the way and let people like me, who are not professional politicians, but are in it because of conviction, show the way. Reform UK is the next main party.
You would say that, though, Ben, with all respect.
Of course I would.
Well, of course you're going to say that. You're not going to say something else. But Philip, you're hearing this. A party like Reform, all they'll ultimately do is make it easier for people like the Labour Party to win and split their sort of more right-of-centre, right-wing voters, people would like to say. What do you think, Philip? Do you think that another party could come in?
No.
I think they could do, but I think it's a long game, Nana. I think we're talking long term here, because what we've got at the moment, we've seen the Labour Party have played identity politics for the last 30 years, and we're seeing on the streets now the payment. You know, they're being paid out, aren't they? They're having their I've got a terrible echo here, so I can barely hear myself. They're having their MPs being attacked almost on the streets. Okay, they're having mobs going right into where their offices are. It's terrible, but that's where we are. We are not, in all reality, going to have as much as I want Reform to really stand up and be counted. We are not going to have Reform, and we're not going to have the SDP making a huge impact this time, but I think it's a longer game, and maybe Reform will do in the future. Yeah, I think so, yes.
But any other party, even if it wasn't Reform, another one, Roger?
Well, it's interesting. Us sitting here discussing this strikes me rather as the children in their room talking about the parents in the next room, because, you know, we're not going to get anywhere until we have proportional representation. No party can get in other than the two main parties, and that's the big problem that we've had. And Labour will probably resist that, because the system has given the Tories 67 years and Labour 33 years of the last 100. And Labour will lose a lot of MPs, the studies show, if we do have proportional representation. So I'm afraid that the current first-past-the-post system prevents any party. I know a lot of people want to go to Reform.
I'm going to get Jerry Hayes in finally. You've got about 20 seconds, Jerry, to respond to that, because he's shaking his head.
It's not going to happen. We had a vote on AV, and the worst thing about the proportional representation, it gets rid of the link between the MP and the constituents, because what proportional representation does, you suck up to your party, you suck up to the party list, you don't suck up to the electorate. That's wrong.
Right, OK. So realistically, then, is there room, another third party? I know your answer, Ben. I'm not even going to ask you. Philip?
You've got to ask me, Nana.
Yeah, you think that. Philip, so this time round, do you think another party could come in other than the main two?
Not this time round, but next time round.
No from Jerry. And Roger, finally for you.
I think we're stuck with this situation and these clowns for quite a long time.
That's what they are. Ben Habib, thank you very much. Deputy Leader of Reform, Philip Kidsley, cultural historian, Roger Gewald, former advisor to the Bank of England, and Jerry Hayes, barrister. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Well, this is GB News on TV, online, on digital radio. We are live. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is it time for a new major political party in British politics? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, but first, let's get your latest news with Tatiana.
Nana, thank you. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. At least 2 protesters were carried away by police at Waterloo Station after more pro-Palestine demonstrations. People could be heard chanting "ceasefire now" and "from the river to the sea" in the middle of the station's concourse. People have also gathered outside Downing Street. Police say around 250 demonstrators are outside the gates on Whitehall, though there's been no disruption to traffic. There have also been reports of further protests on Waterloo Bridge and at Parliament Square. Police are currently in attendance.
Occupation no more! Israel is a terror state!
It's been a day of protests in London and across the country. These scenes were captured in North London this afternoon. As you can hear, some protesters were heard describing Israel as a terror state. Elsewhere, there were reports of disruption at several major train stations. Large crowds were also seen marching in Bristol, Manchester and Glasgow. And at least 4 people were arrested during a Just Stop Oil protest earlier today. Activists marched from the Shell headquarters in opposition to the approval of more than 100 oil and gas projects. The group says peaceful protesters are being locked up, while those who it describes as climate criminals are protected. The Chancellor says there's a pathway to lower taxes ahead of next week's autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt says it's time to focus on growth after inflation halved over the past year. It's understood he's considering cutting rates on inheritance and business taxes in what could be one of the last fiscal announcements before the next election. For more on all of those stories, you can visit our website, gbnews.com.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So if you just tuned in, where have you been? It's almost the end of the show. We've got about 21 seconds to go, 21 minutes to go. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. It's time for our Great British Debate this hour. Before the break, I was asking, is it time for a new main political party in politics? Lots of you got in touch with your views. We'll read some of them. The UK political landscape is witnessing significant developments. The Tory party is facing internal turmoil. Rishi Sunak's pushing ahead with the Rwanda policy. Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer is navigating challenges within his party, facing questions about credibility and acquiring an astonishing 30-point lead over the Conservatives. which I suspect is probably diminishing. The SNP are in crisis. Remember Nicola Sturgeon, the dodgy gender recognition reform and the caravan. We've got the Lib Dems who can't work out what colour their banner is. Is it yellow or orange? The Stormont aren't sitting. So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is it time for a new political party in politics? Let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, Matthew Lauser and Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie Cundy.
Yes, indeed. I really do think so. I mean, people are in the political wilderness now because Conservatives are no longer Conservatives. They're like the Liberal Democrats, and Labour are more Conservative than ever. I mean, there's a cigarette paper between them both, and they're both in turmoil. They've both got in-house fighting, and, you know, I don't know who to vote for. Only person I'd vote for is Nigel Farage. And you know what? Rishi is worried. Rishi is watching I'm a Celebrity will be starting tomorrow night at 9 o'clock because of Nigel Farage, because he's going to come back big time in politics and he's going to be trying to reach out to the younger audience who call him the GOAT on TikTok, by the way.
I saw do they?
They do, yes.
They do. I'm not cool enough for TikTok.
No, but I have to say, look what's going on. We know what's happened. I think Rishi made a huge mistake getting rid of Suella, the only one that said what people were thinking. Rishi is spineless. He's like a jellyfish, no backbone in Prada pants. And, you know, I'm sorry, he's a backstabber. He backstabbed Suella. He backstabbed Boris. He'll never change. He's not popular. He's never going to win the election. There's Bob Hope, no Bob. And Bob's left the building. Yeah, that's the word. But listen, and now we're going to look at Keir Starmer. I mean, out both of them, it's like Lauren Hardy would do a better job. But Keir Starmer, I mean, he's got a lot of fighting in his own party. As we said, 8 shadow ministers already quit, 2 parliamentary private quit. You know, 330 Labour councillors have opened this open letter in disgust of how he's, you know, what he says about the ceasefire. But I'm really sorry. He was the one that backed Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know how overnight he suddenly changed his views. Matthew, you might be able to tell me, because only in 2019 he was there going, you know, Jeremy Corbyn would be a great Prime Minister and he wouldn't have any words said against him. And it seemed like overnight he had a Horlicks and suddenly woke up and changed his mind.
I think something stronger than a Horlicks.
Well, I'm sorry, but the man doesn't know what he believes in and he's never even mentioned immigration. And
you can respond to that challenge, because what happened? You were part of all of that.
Well, I was... I certainly wasn't part of Jeremy Corbyn, and I didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn to be leader of the party, and neither did Keir.
But at the time,
I mean, at the time, it's very difficult because when you're in, it's like a football team. When I mean, it was pretty clear that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't going to be Prime Minister. I mean, in the 2017 election, I was with Gloria Di Piero of GBNews, who was then a Labour MP, and we were knocking on doors saying, "Don't worry, love," to people. You're me duck, as they say in Gloria's old constituency. Jeremy's not going to be Prime Minister, but that was very difficult. As far as a new party is concerned. New parties, I mean, we have the new party in terms of we have Reform, who are doing surprisingly well, and actually the Greens, who are on 7-8% in the polls, and I think that is a testament, because Labour is 25 points ahead, but it's still not, it's not sweeping all before it. It's the Conservatives who are doing very badly. So that's a challenge for Labour, that it's got to turn disenchantment with the Tories into a positive desire for people to have a Labour government.
We're still talking about the same boring 2 old parties, Labour and Conservatives, who are both...
But do you remember when people who left the party over Corbyn left the Labour Party, people like Luciana Berger and Chuka Umunna.
Yes, I remember Chuka Umunna for the Change UK.
Yes, they tried and failed.
What a mess. But that was because they were useless to a lot of them.
Well, it's very hard to start a new party.
Chuka Umunna had a chance to lead the Labour Party and he turned it down.
Well, he should have stayed and fought, which is what Keir did.
Which would have been better, but unfortunately he didn't, and then he set up Change, and that was a disaster.
Which is let that be a lesson to people thinking of a new
party.
No, that's not really a lesson, though. It was a rubbish party.
But look, Reform UK, they've seen their polls go up. I mean, it's up like 11%, I think it is. And I know it's tough to make headway with a new party, but I think people are really sick.
Would you be a candidate for them, Liz?
I would. I think people are sick of the woke nonsense. I think people want Conservatives to be Conservatives again. The worst thing ever, bringing back Cameron, for God's sake.
We can all agree on that, absolutely.
I mean, a massive failure who walked out as Prime Minister, and Rishi Rishi's pulled him out of the fridge freezer while he's... I mean, why? I mean,
it does
really
look like the public school boys are
backwards.
back in charge, doesn't it? You've got all 4 of the great officers of state. Not only are they all blokes, all 4 of them went to fee-paying schools, which only 7% of the population do. So it's not exactly representative. It doesn't chime with how people live their lives.
I think people want change. I think
That's
people
why we need a
want
Labour
something
government.
new.
No,
and I think they are sick. They are sick of this woke nonsense.
them.
Keir Starmer doesn't even know what a woman is. He's weak, he's kept in flip-flop, and Rishi has got no chance of
no way
winning
that
the
he's
election.
flipping on his decision with Gaza, though, because his
Absolutely.
wife is... obviously, his children are brought up in the Jewish faith, and I think his wife is
I believe so,
Jewish,
yeah.
I think
It's
so,
Jewish
as
heritage,
far as
yeah.
I know, of Jewish heritage. So, yeah, she's telling him right now.
Well, I think also it's what he believes as well. But yeah, it's clearly
It's what he believes,
personal.
but
So I think the flip-flops, they'll have to be binned by the Tory party because he's stayed firm.
Well, he has to stay firm because she won't let him flip-flop at all, and his children as well. So I think on this occasion we're seeing some metal and steel, but it's only because he's got, in a sense, skin in the game, as people would say, that, he has an interest of his own with it.
But what's the worry with Keir Starmer? He's never talked about immigration, even at the Labour conference party. Never mentioned one of the most important issues that people are all worried about. He didn't even bring it up.
No, he should have got the immigration in the speech. If I'd written the speech, it would have been in there, I can tell you.
Well, listen, this show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices. Their opportunity to be on this show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got how many of you? 4 of you, yeah. Let's start with you, Brian Dugan in Solihull. Brian, what do you think?
Hi, Nana. Yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty clear from the debate in the studio that a new party is something that we want to see emerging, or that the consensus in the studio is that anyway. I think the Tory party is a real identity crisis. They don't know where to stand, which is why someone like Cameron has been brought back into government, as you say, kind of dinosaur, and a man largely responsible for some of the febrile politics.
He could be on the John Cleese programme.
He could be on the Dinosaur Hour.
Yes, the Dinosaur Hour, exactly. In terms of Labour, I kind of disagree with you in terms of what you're saying in terms of Labour at the moment. Look, they've got a 25-point lead. They must be doing something right. There is internal wrangling in terms of perhaps Gaza. I think everyone is wrestling with their conscience over Gaza.
I've got to move on, Brian, but I don't think so, Brian. I think it's that the Conservative Party are just doing everything wrong. Alan Cook.
Hi, Nana.
Hello, Alan.
Every 100 years, yes to the new party, obviously, but every 100 years there's a major revolution in English politics. The anniversary is next year. So with the 2 main parties being in step with each other, we have no choice. So I am one of the 550 parliamentary candidates for Reform UK.
Oh.
And as Cuddy just said, we are hitting 11% in the polls, only 8 points behind the Tories. So what we are going to do is trust and common sense back into politics. So what I say is don't change your politics, change your party.
Don't change politics, change your party. I wonder if people will, though. Jonathan Jones, has he 2 hopes and Bob Hope and no hope of any other party emerging other than the Conservatives and Labour?
You never know, Nana. I've taken the first tea grown in England all the way up to north of Scotland this weekend. And it's pure guesswork, but I've just been reading the tea leaves for you. And Nigel's going to win the jungle. He's going to come up to Scotland and win the SNP vote. He's going to be Prime Minister before you know.
You think? Yeah. Cheers, man. Tea.
You've gone posh, Jonathan. You've swapped your mug for a posh cup.
Yeah.
I'm in Scotland. I couldn't find a decent mug.
You couldn't find a decent mug, he says. OK, let's go over to Seshni in Milton Keynes. Seshni.
Hello, Nana. Yes, I do say yes for a new political party. At the moment, with the way things are going with the Conservative and also with the Labour Party, what's happening this week with Suella Braverman, Jeremy Corbyn and other issues, we need a political party that is looking out for the heart of the nation, tackling issues like immigration, net zero, gender issues, tax and other important issues. And at the moment...
let's get to the
we're
point
not getting that. We need a new party.
So what do you think? We need a new one or not?
there's space and there is a time for a new party.
It's definitely time. Thank you very much, Seshni. Fabulous work. Also, Jonathan Jones, Alan Cook, and also Brian. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you. Those are my great British voices. This is GB News. It's time now for the quick fire quiz, the part of the show where we test our panel on some of the other topics that are hitting the headlines right now. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Your buzzer, please, Lizzie. And also Matthew Lyles, the former Labour advisor. Your buzzer, Matthew. And please play along at home. Right, question one. King Charles celebrated his birthday earlier this week, but how old is he? Is it A, 70, B, 75, C, 80, and we actually have a D, 85? I think that was Matthew Love.
He is B, 75.
B, 75?
I'm 75.
75. How old do you think he is at home? The answer is B, 75. You're absolutely right. Yes. OK, question two. Suella Braverman was sacked from government this week. But who is the shortest-serving Home Secretary in the 21st century? Is it A, Grant Shapps? Is it B, Priti Patel? Is it C, Theresa May? Or D, Amber Rudd? Lizzie Cundy.
I'm going to go for A.
A, you're saying it's Grant Shapps?
I would say the same.
You're saying Grant Shapps? All right, let's see if you're right. The answer is Grant Shapps. It's 1-all. Wow. Who do you think out of those has been the most effective?
None of them.
None, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
No, do you know what? Priti
bonus.
Patel was in a similar situation as Suella. Hands were tied, couldn't get things done.
For a bonus as well, then, what number Home Secretary are we on?
Third.
7th.
7. Lizzie says third. In this whole Conservative...
In this Conservative, yeah.
Or 7.
Well, I think the answer is actually 8.
Is it? OK, well, I'm closest. Yes,
it's not closest.
Is it 8?
Oh.
It's not closest answer wins. Right, yes, but Grant Shapps, though, yeah, he was the shortest-serving Home Secretary. He served in the position for a final of 6 days.
They didn't have time to get him a pass. They didn't have time to get him a pass for the building.
It's all part of the Lettuce Truss era.
Yeah.
Lettuce Truss in Truss. Question 3. How many former Prime Ministers have come back to government since the 18th century? Is it A, 12, B, 14, C, 16 or D, 18? Lizzie Cundy.
D, 18.
18.
I'm going to say C.
C, 16. Let's see if you're right. You're both wrong, I bet. Yeah, of course you are. B is 14.
14, we are wrong.
You sounded but totally wrong. Yes, 14 ex-presidents.
Is it still 1
Not doing very well, yes.
Previously come back in different government roles since the 18th century. Did you get that right at home?
It's only one since the Second World War.
Sorry,
of course
yes,
you did.
indeed.
Question 4. How many times has Suella Braverman been Home Secretary? Is it A1, B2, C3 or D4? Oh, I don't know who that was.
Me.
That was you.
No,
right.
I'm sorry to be out, but it was B2.
B2.
It's 2. I think I was... got nipped you.
The answer is B. It is 2. Did you get that right at home? Yes. So it's 2-1 to Matthew.
I've got to win sometime.
But there's still time for you to lose.
Come on.
Question 5. The Supreme Court has ruled that the Rwanda plan as illegal. How much has the government paid to Rwanda so far? Is it 50 million, 100 million, or 140 million, or 200 million? Unfortunately, Matthew Lala.
It's 140 million.
It's 140.
Yeah, 140 million.
I knew you knew that. You're normally quick on the buzzer, Lizzie.
So I've got to say congratulations to Matthew Lala for once in your life.
I knew you'd get it. I gave it to you.
But thank you both.
He was complaining in the green room about it.
So kind of you.
I'm very kind.
Well, how did you do at
You're very
home? I'm
lovely.
sure you did well. Listen, on today's show, we've been asking, is it time to axe the Rwanda plan? Well, what do you think? According to our Twitter poll, 37% of you say yes, but the resounding 63% of you say no. No, well, I agree with you. It is not time to axe that Rwanda plan. Do you think they're right, Lizzie?
Yeah, I think we've got to continue with it, and we're not going to be ruled by foreign judges. Let's do this.
Matthew Love.
Sadly, I think it is time to get rid of the plan and start having a proper plan to sort out the boats crisis.
Well, what will Labour do? Because they never mentioned it.
No, well, but I can. Labour would sort the backlog out, would have a proper cross-border police unit. I can give you... next week, I'll give you the whole plan. On a T-shirt.
Look, I'm sorry, Rwanda is a wonderful place, and I think it's quite racist how everyone is being about Rwanda, and it's safe. As I told you from my statistics.
We can't spend any more than 140 million. We've spent so much money already. We've got to have a new solution.
We're spending 8 million a day housing people, so...
Yeah, we need to get that bill down by stopping using hotels, which is another one of part of Labour's plan.
How are they going to do that?
By sorting out the...
Written on the back of a flip-flop?
No,
exactly.
Not at all. But sorting out the backlog and having a proper returns unit so we can return more people.
To Keir Starmer's face for
panel,
Christmas.
fabulous Lizzie Cundy.
Thank you.
And also the brilliant Matthew Larser.
Pleasure.
Thank you to you at home for your company, as ever. Make sure you join Join me tomorrow. Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly will be live. I'll leave you with the weather. Enjoy.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to Sunday, for most of us we will see further rain. There'll be a few brighter moments and for all it will be fairly mild. Reason for the unsettled weather is this huge area low pressure which is not going to go far as we go through the second half of the weekend. Note the tightly packed isobars down towards the south indicating it's going to be pretty blustery. So as we end Saturday, going into the early hours of Sunday, relatively clear skies across England and Wales initially. Further north we have further areas of rain and they will sink their way southeastwards as we go through the course of the night. It's a mild one for all